When my daughter served me that slice of pumpkin pie, she was smiling. It was the same sweet smile I'd seen for 40 years. But as I held the fork, I didn't see a dessert. I saw a death sentence. You see, my daughter didn't know one thing. I wasn't just her father anymore. I was an FBI informant, and every word she whispered was being recorded. My name is Harold Peterson. I built a multi-million-dollar company with my own 2 hands, thinking I was securing my daughter's future. I gave her everything: a house, cars, even her children's tuition. In return, she called me an old man in secret texts and plotted to accelerate my timeline for a $2 million insurance payout. This Thanksgiving, she thought she was finishing her plan. She thought the digitalis in my pie would end me. She was wrong. Before the night was over, her world would collapse in handcuffs, and I would finally learn the terrifying truth about the woman I raised. Subscribe to hear how a simple Saturday breakfast turned into a high-stakes FBI sting operation. This is a story of betrayal, justice, and a father who refused to be a victim. Let's start from the beginning. I sold the company 2 years ago for $4.2 million. Not bad for a kid who started with nothing but calloused hands and a willingness to outwork everyone else on the job site. But money, I was learning, couldn't buy the things that mattered most. My phone buzzed at exactly 8 a.m. A text from my daughter, Christine. "Dad, we're still coming for lunch today. Emma and Jack can't wait to see you. They've been talking about Grandpa's pancakes all week." I smiled at the screen, already mentally calculating how much batter I'd need. Emma was 7, with her grandmother's green eyes and a laugh that could fill any room. Jack had just turned 5, obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced that his grandfather knew everything about everything. They weren't wrong. I did know a lot, but the most important thing I knew was that those 2 kids were the best part of my life now. I spent the next hour preparing. Fresh strawberries from the farmer's market. Real maple syrup, not that corn syrup garbage. The good bacon, the thick-cut kind from Henderson's butcher shop on Main Street. Margaret's cast iron skillet, seasoned with decades of Saturday morning breakfasts. By 11:30, the house smelled like childhood. Like family, like everything I'd worked my whole life to build. Christine's silver Audi pulled into my driveway at exactly noon. I watched from the kitchen window as she helped the kids out of their car seats, a process that seemed to take longer every time, with more buckles and straps than a parachute harness. But something was different today. Christine's husband, Derek, wasn't with them. That should have been my first warning. "Grandpa." Emma burst through the front door like a small hurricane, her arms already reaching for me. I scooped her up, feeling her tiny hands grab my shoulders, her face pressing into my neck. "There's my favorite granddaughter," I said. "I'm your only granddaughter." She giggled, the same joke we've been sharing since she learned to talk. Doesn't make it less true. Jack followed more slowly, his serious 5-year-old face studying me like I was a puzzle to solve. "Grandpa, did you know that T-Rex couldn't actually roar? Scientists think they made sounds like crocodiles." I did not know that. I admitted, setting Emma down to give Jack a proper handshake, our ritual. "You're getting smarter than me, buddy." "That's impossible," he said with absolute certainty. "You know everything." Christine stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. She was 41 now, a real estate agent in Minneapolis, married to Derek for 12 years. She had her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubbornness, a combination that had made her teenage years interesting, to say the least. "Dad," she said. Just that. Just my name, flat and careful. "Christine, where's Derek?" "Working." She didn't elaborate. I let it go. Derek was always working. Vice president of something or other at a financial services company I'd never fully understood. He made good money. Better money than I'd made at his age. But he wore it like a costume. All designer suits and golf club memberships and opinions about wine that made me want to pour a Budweiser just to watch his face twitch. But he was my daughter's husband, and that meant he was family, even when I didn't particularly like him. "Pancakes are ready," I announced. "Who's hungry?" Lunch was perfect. The pancakes came out golden brown, the bacon crispy, the strawberries sweet. Emma ate 3 pancakes, which was 2 more than she should have been able to fit in her small body. Jack carefully arranged his bacon into a dinosaur shape before devouring it, piece by piece. Christine picked at her food, moving it around her plate like she was looking for something hidden underneath. "You okay, honey?" I asked between bites. "Fine." Just tired. Another warning I ignored. After lunch, I took the kids to my workshop in the garage. This was our tradition. Every visit, I showed them something new. Today, it was the birdhouse I'd been building. Simple design, cedar wood, a project I'd started specifically so they could help finish it. Can I use the hammer? Jack asked, his eyes wide. With my help, absolutely. We spent an hour in that garage, the three of us.
Emma painted the birdhouse purple, not traditional, but she insisted purple was Bird's favorite color, and who was I to argue? Jack hammered in 3 nails under my careful supervision, each one straighter than the last.
You're a natural, I told him. Just like your grandpa. Mom says you built lots of houses, Emma said, still focused on her painting. Hundreds of them. Schools, too.
And that hospital downtown where you were born. You built the hospital. Jack's voice was pure awe. Well, my company did. We had a lot of help. Christine appeared in the garage doorway, her car keys already in her hand. Kids, time to clean up. We need to get going.
But Mom, we're not done. Emma protested. The birdhouse will still be here next week, I said quickly, seeing the storm clouds forming in my daughter's expression. We can hang it up then.
Give the paint time to dry. The kids grumbled but complied, washing their hands in my utility sink while Christine watched from the doorway. She hadn't come into the garage at all. Hadn't even stepped over the threshold. Something was wrong. I could feel it the way I used to feel rain coming before the first cloud appeared. A pressure in the air, a change in the atmosphere that meant trouble was on the horizon. I walked them to the car, hugging each grandchild like it might be the last time. A habit I'd developed after Margaret died. You never knew which goodbye would be the final one. See you next Saturday? I asked Christine through her open window. She didn't answer immediately. Her hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles white. Christine, we need to talk, Dad. Not now, but soon. About what? She shook her head, already putting the car in reverse. I'll call you. I stood in my driveway and watched the silver Audi disappear around the corner, carrying my grandchildren away from me. The September sun was warm on my shoulders, but something cold had settled in my chest. That night, I called her 3 times. She didn't answer. The week that followed was strange. Christine texted once, a brief message saying she was busy with work and would call me when things calmed down. I texted back asking if everything was okay. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. My daughter had never been an emoji person. I tried calling Derek's cell phone on Wednesday. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking if Christine was all right. If there was anything I could do to help. He never called back. By Friday, I was genuinely worried. I considered driving to their house. A 90-minute trip to the Minneapolis suburbs. But something stopped me. Some instinct that said showing up uninvited would only make things worse. Instead, I focused on the birdhouse. I added a small perch below the entrance hole, sanded down the rough edges Emma had missed with her purple paint. I imagined hanging it in my backyard with the kids watching. Imagined Jack's face when the first bird moved in. Simple pleasures. The kind of things money couldn't buy, but somehow made all the sacrifice worth it. Saturday morning, I woke at 6:15 as usual. Made my coffee. Said good morning to Margaret's photo. Checked my phone for messages. Nothing. I waited until 9 o'clock, then texted Christine. Still on for lunch today? The response came immediately, which should have been reassuring, but somehow wasn't. Can you come to our house instead? We need to talk. Just you. 2 p.m. Just you. Not bring ingredients for pancakes. Not the kids miss you. Just you. The cold feeling in my chest returned. Sharper now. More defined. Of course, I typed back. Everything okay? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Just come, please. The drive to Minneapolis felt longer than usual. The highway stretched out ahead of me, mile after mile of Minnesota farmland turning into suburbs, turning into the carefully manicured neighborhoods where my daughter had built her life. Their house was a Georgian colonial, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen that had been renovated twice in the 12 years they'd owned it. The second renovation had cost $87,000. I knew because I paid for it. Not that anyone had asked me to. I'd offered. That's what fathers did. That's what I'd always done. Derek's BMW was in the driveway, next to Christine's Audi. Both cars present.
Both parents home, but no sounds of children playing in the yard, no bikes left carelessly on the lawn, no evidence of the chaos that usually accompanied my grandchildren. I parked on the street and sat for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel. The house looked different somehow, unwelcoming. The windows that usually reflected sunlight seemed darker, like eyes that had stopped seeing. I was being ridiculous, paranoid, probably just my imagination working overtime after a week of unanswered calls. I walked up the flagstone path I'd helped Derek install 3 summers ago. A weekend project that had turned into a week-long ordeal because he kept insisting on doing things the modern way instead of listening to someone who'd been laying stone for 40 years.
The doorbell chimed. I heard footsteps inside.
Then the door swung open, and Christine stood before me, still wearing the expression I couldn't read. "Dad," she said, "come in." The living room had been rearranged since my last visit. The family photos that usually covered the mantel were gone, replaced by abstract art that probably cost more than my first truck. The couch was new, too. White leather. The kind that showed every stain and would last about 5 minutes with 2 young children in the house. But there were no children in sight. "Where are Emma and Jack?" I asked. "At Derek's parents' house." My stomach dropped. "Why?" Christine sat down on the white leather couch, her hands folded in her lap like she was about to conduct an interview.
Derek emerged from the kitchen doorway, a glass of something amber in his hand. Whiskey, probably. The good stuff he liked to brag about. "Sit down, Harold," Derek said. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Peterson. Harold. Like we were business associates, not family. I sat. "Dad," Christine began, and her voice had that rehearsed quality I recognized from her real estate presentations. "Derek and I have been talking about the future, about what's best for Emma and Jack." "Okay," I said slowly. "That sounds important." "It is." She glanced at Derek, who nodded encouragingly. "We've decided to make some changes. To our lifestyle, our priorities. To the people we allow in our children's lives." The cold in my chest turned to ice. "What kind of changes?" Derek stepped forward, swirling his whiskey like a movie villain. "Look, Harold, you're a good man. You worked hard, built a business. All that blue-collar American dream stuff. We respect that. But..." I could hear the word coming before he said it. "But our children are growing up in a different world. A world with different expectations, different standards. We want them to have every advantage. The best schools, the best connections, the right kind of influences. And I'm not the right kind of influence." Christine jumped in before Derek could answer. "It's not like that, Dad. It's just the values you grew up with, the way you see the world. It doesn't fit with what we're trying to build for them." "What values, exactly?" My voice was steady, but my hands had begun to shake. "Hard work? Family loyalty. Showing up when you say you will. Old-fashioned values," Derek said smoothly. "Working-class values. There's nothing wrong with them, of course. They serve their purpose. But Emma and Jack need to learn how the world really works. How to network. How to present themselves. How to move in the right circles." I looked at my daughter. My only child. The baby I'd held in my arms 38 years ago, promising Margaret I would protect her from anything. "Christine," I said quietly, "is this what you want? To keep me from my grandchildren because I'm not sophisticated enough?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's not forever," she said. "Just for now. Until they're older. Until they've developed the right foundation." "And when will that be?" Silence. "Christine, when will that be?" She finally looked at me, and I saw it then. The shame, buried deep beneath layers of justification and rationalization, but also the resolve. The decision had already been made. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a notification. "We think it's best if you don't see the children for a while," she said. "No visits, no phone calls, no birthday presents that remind them of where they came from. Where they came from." I stood up slowly, my knees aching, my heart aching worse. I looked around the living room. At the house I'd helped them buy. At the furniture I'd helped them afford. At the life I'd subsidized for 12 years so my daughter could live the dream she'd always wanted. "I understand," I said, and I walked out the door. The drive home passed in a blur. I don't remember the highway, don't remember the exit, don't remember pulling into my driveway. One moment I was standing in Christine's living room, hearing words that didn't make sense,
and the next I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at Margaret's photo. The September sun casting long shadows across the floor.
"They don't want me around the kids," I said to her picture. "Our grandchildren. They think I'm not good enough."
Margaret smiled back at me, frozen in that summer afternoon, offering no answers. She'd always been the one who knew how to handle Christine. The mediator. The translator between my blunt construction site directness and our daughter's more complicated emotional landscape. Without her, I was lost. I sat there until the sun went down, until the kitchen grew dark around me, until my phone buzzed with a text that pulled me back to reality. "Christine, I hope you understand this isn't personal. We're just doing what's best for the kids. Please respect our decision. Not personal." I read those words 3 times, trying to make them mean something other than what they obviously meant. My daughter had just told me I would never see my grandchildren again, and she wanted me to know it wasn't personal. I typed back, "I understand." I didn't. But what else was there to say? Sunday morning, I woke at 4:47 a.m., 2 hours before my usual time. Sleep had come in fragments, interrupted by dreams of Emma's laugh, and Jack's serious face, and Christine's voice saying where they came from over and over like a broken record. I made coffee, said good morning to Margaret. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I pulled out my files. Every financial document from the past 15 years lived in a gray metal filing cabinet in my home office. A converted bedroom that still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets Margaret used to keep in the closets. Tax returns, bank statements, investment records, and buried near the bottom, a thick folder labeled Christine and Derek. I hadn't opened that folder in years, hadn't needed to. The money flowed out automatically. Monthly transfers and one-time gifts and loans that we all knew would never be repaid. I'd stopped keeping track around 2019 when Margaret got sick, and everything else became background noise to the slow catastrophe of losing her. Now, I spread the contents across my desk like evidence at a trial. The first document was a cashier's check dated March 15, 2012. $65,000. The down payment for their first house, a modest 3-bedroom in Edina that Christine had declared perfect for starting a family. I remembered writing that check, remembered the pride I felt helping my daughter take her first step toward the American dream. The second document was a loan agreement from 2014, $40,000, ostensibly to cover Derek's MBA tuition at the University of Minnesota. "It's an investment in our future, Dad," Christine had said. "Once Derek gets his degree, he'll be making real money." The loan had never been repaid. The agreement had never been mentioned again. I kept digging. A check for $15,000 in 2015 to cover unexpected medical expenses that I later realized meant a destination wedding in Cancun. Another $25,000 in 2016 when they upgraded to the Georgian Colonial. The first kitchen renovation, $52,000. The second, $87,000. New cars, vacations, private school tuition for Emma that I'd agreed to cover temporarily 3 years ago and was still paying. The numbers piled up like bricks, each one representing a piece of my retirement, my security, my future. By 9 a.m., I had filled 3 pages of a yellow legal pad with figures. My handwriting grew shakier as the totals climbed, but I forced myself to keep going, to see it all, to understand exactly what my love had cost me. The final number sat at the bottom of the 3rd page, circled twice in red ink. $487,000. Nearly $500,000 transferred to my daughter and her husband over 13 years. Not counting the monthly private school payments. Not counting the little gifts for birthdays and holidays. Not counting the college funds I'd established for Emma and Jack, currently holding $85,000 each. I set down my pen and stared at the number, until it stopped looking like money and started looking like a life sentence. $500,000. And in return, I'd been told I wasn't sophisticated enough to eat dinner with my own grandchildren. The phone call to my lawyer happened almost without conscious thought. One moment I was staring at that number, the next I was listening to Richard Chan's secretary tell me he could see me Tuesday at 2 p.m. "It's urgent," I heard myself say. "Tell him it's about my estate. Mr. Peterson, I can check if he has any cancellations. Tuesday is fine." The words came out calmer than I felt. I've waited 13 years. I can wait 2 more days. I spent those 2 days in a fog, moving through my house like a ghost. I didn't call Christine, didn't text, Didn't reach out to Derek or try to negotiate or beg for access to my grandchildren. What would be the point? The decision had been made. By my daughter. By her husband. By the new values they decided were more important than family loyalty. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since selling my company. I got organized. I scanned every document in that folder, creating digital copies stored in 3 different locations. I printed spreadsheets showing the timeline of payments, the amounts, the stated purposes versus the actual uses. I pulled my current will from the fireproof safe in my closet and read it carefully, noting every provision I'd made for Christine, for Derek, for the grandchildren who apparently didn't need a working-class influence in their lives. The will had been written in 2018, when Margaret was still healthy and the future seemed predictable. Everything went to Christine, with trust funds for the grandchildren to be distributed when they turned 25. Standard estate planning for a man who'd worked his whole life to leave something behind. Standard, predictable, completely inadequate for what I was feeling now. Richard Chen's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown St. Paul, the kind of building I might have bid on constructing 20 years ago. The waiting room was all leather chairs and abstract art, designed to make clients feel important and lawyers feel expensive. Richard had been my attorney for 18 years, since a contract dispute with a subcontractor nearly bankrupted my company. He'd saved my business then, and I'd trusted him with my legal affairs ever since. Real estate transactions, Margaret's medical directives, the sale of Peterson Construction. Richard had handled it all with the quiet competence of a man who understood that sometimes the law was the only protection regular people had against world designed to exploit them. Harold. He rose from behind his mahogany desk, hand extended. Good to see you. Though I'll admit, your message had me concerned. Urgent estate matter usually means someone's dying. No one's dying, I said, settling into the chair across from him. At least not physically. I told him everything. Christine's announcement, Derek's speech about working-class values. The folder of financial documents I'd spent 2 days organizing. Richard listened without interrupting, his face carefully neutral, the way lawyers learn to hide their reactions. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot to process, he said finally. I'm sorry, Harold, truly. I'm not looking for sympathy, Richard. I'm looking for options. He nodded slowly, pulling a yellow legal pad toward him. All right, let's talk about options. First, the money you've given them over the years. The $487,000, that's gone. Some of it was documented as loans, but without formal repayment terms or collateral, it would be nearly impossible to recover. I know. I'm not trying to get it back. Then what are you trying to do? I leaned forward in my chair. I want to change my will. Completely. I want to make sure that when I die, not one more dollar of my money goes to people who think I'm not good enough to share a meal with my own grandchildren. Richard's pen hovered over the legal pad. You want to disinherit your daughter. I want to disinherit her husband. I want to create conditions, protections. I want to make sure that whatever I leave behind goes to people who actually want me in their lives, or to causes that will do some good in the world. And your grandchildren, Emma and Jack. The question hit harder than I expected. Those 2 kids were innocent. They hadn't asked to be used as pawns in their parents' social climbing scheme. They didn't know that their grandfather was being erased from their lives like a math error on a chalkboard. I don't know yet, I admitted. That's what I need help figuring out. Richard set down his pen. Harold, I have to ask, is there any chance this is temporary? Family disputes like this, they sometimes resolve themselves. Emotions cool down. People come to their senses. My daughter looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't sophisticated enough for her children. Her husband called my values working class like it was a disease. Does that sound like something that resolves itself? No, Richard said quietly. It doesn't. Then let's talk about what comes next. We spent 2 hours in that office, mapping out possibilities. A new will, obviously, with Christine removed as primary beneficiary, but also trusts, conditions, structures designed to protect my assets from people who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient source of funding. The grandchildren are complicated, Richard explained. If you leave them money directly, their parents will effectively control it until they're 18. Even in a trust, Christine and Derek would likely be named as guardians of the children's interests. So they win either way, unless we get creative. Richard pulled a fic binder from his shelf. There are options.
Delayed distributions. The money stays in trust until the children are adults, completely outside their parents' control. Educational trusts that can only be used for specific purposes. Conditional bequests that require the beneficiaries to meet certain criteria. What kind of criteria? That's up to you. Some people require beneficiaries to maintain a relationship with the grantor. Others tie distributions to academic achievement, employment, even marriage status. The courts give testators wide latitude in how they structure their estates. I thought about Emma, painting that birdhouse purple. About Jack, hammering nails under my supervision. About the relationship we'd been building, Saturday by Saturday, that was now being demolished by their parents' pretensions. I want them to know me, I said finally. When they're old enough to make their own choices, I want them to know who their grandfather really was, not the version their parents are selling. Richard nodded, making notes. We can structure something around that. A letter, perhaps, to be delivered when they reach a certain age. Documentation of the support you provided their parents. Evidence that you tried to maintain a relationship. Evidence. The word tasted bitter.
I'm building a legal case against my own daughter. You're protecting yourself, Harold. And ultimately, you're protecting your grandchildren from a distorted version of history. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. The drive home from St. Paul took me past the hospital where Emma had been born. The one my company had helped build. What felt like a lifetime ago. I pulled into the visitor parking lot and sat there for a moment, watching the automatic doors slide open and closed, people entering with hope and leaving with answers they hadn't wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Peterson, this is Amanda Reyes. I worked with your daughter at Lakewood Realty. I heard about what happened, and I think there are some things you should know. Can we meet? I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Amanda Reyes. The name was vaguely familiar. Christine had mentioned her once or twice, a younger agent at the same brokerage. But why would she be reaching out to me? And what had she heard? What things? I typed back. The response came immediately. Things about your daughter and her husband. Things about money. I'd rather not put it in writing. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's a coffee shop called The Daily Grind on University Avenue in Minneapolis. 10 a.m. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. This felt wrong somehow. Secretive. The kind of cloak and dagger nonsense I'd always avoided in business. But I was also desperate for answers. Desperate to understand how my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd sent to college, the woman I'd supported through every chapter of her adult life, had become someone who could cut me out of my grandchildren's lives without flinching. I'll be there, I typed. And then I went home to prepare for whatever was coming next. That night I sat in my office, surrounded by documents, my laptop open to a spreadsheet I'd been building since Tuesday. Every payment I'd ever made to Christine and Derek, organized by date and amount and stated purpose. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. For the first 8 years, the money had flowed steadily but modestly. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Normal parental support for a young couple getting established. Nothing that would raise eyebrows. But starting in 2020, the year Margaret died, the amounts had exploded. $50,000 in a single month, supposedly for investment opportunities. Another $75,000 3 months later for business expenses that were never explained. The second kitchen renovation, rushed through during my deepest grief, presented as a necessity rather than a luxury. They'd waited until I was broken. Until I was too lost in sorrow to ask questions or demand accountability. And then they'd extracted every dollar they could, knowing I'd pay anything to maintain some connection to the only family I had left. I closed the laptop and walked to Margaret's photo on my nightstand. Did you see this coming? I asked her. Did you know what she would become? Margaret smiled her eternal smile, offering no answers. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice that sounded very much like my late wife whispered, "Look closer, Harold. The truth is in the details." I didn't know what details she meant. Not yet. But tomorrow, I was going to find out. The Daily Grind occupied a narrow storefront on University Avenue, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese restaurant. The kind of neighborhood coffee shop that survived on regulars and good espresso rather than trendy branding. I arrived at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, and ordered a black coffee from a barista who looked young enough to be my grandchild. I chose a table near the back, facing the door. Old habits from decades of contract negotiations. Never sit with your back to the entrance. Always see who's coming before they see you. Amanda Reyes walked in at exactly 10 o'clock.
She was younger than I'd expected, late 20s, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional ponytail and the kind of nervous energy that suggested she wasn't entirely sure she should be here. Mr. Peterson?
She stopped at my table, clutching a leather portfolio like a life preserver. Harold, please.
Sit down.
She ordered a complicated drink with too many words in its name, then settled across from me, the portfolio placed carefully on the table between us like a barrier.
Thank you for meeting me, she said. I know this is unusual. Unusual is one word for it. I sipped my coffee, waiting. In my experience, people who had something to say would say it eventually. You just had to give them room. Amanda fidgeted with her portfolio clasp. Opened it. Closed it. Opened it again.
I worked with Christine for 3 years, she finally began. Started at Lakewood Realty right out of college. She was my mentor, sort of.
Showed me the ropes, introduced me to clients, helped me close my first few deals. That sounds like my daughter. It was. At first. Amanda's eyes dropped to the table. But then I started hearing things.
In the break room, at office parties, sometimes just when she didn't realize I was nearby. Things about you. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. What kind of things? She called you her retirement fund. Said you were good for at least another $500,000 before you died, and that Derek had a plan to make sure most of it went to them instead of charity or whatever bleeding heart causes.
You might think up. I set down my cup carefully, afraid I might crush it if I held on any tighter.
When was this? The first time? About 18 months ago. Right after your wife's death anniversary, Christine came into the office, talking about how she'd convinced you to pay for Emma's private school tuition, and Derek had suggested some investment opportunity that would keep the pipeline flowing. Her words, not mine. The investment
opportunity.
I remembered that conversation. Derek had pitched it as a can't-miss real estate deal, something about commercial property in Duluth. I'd written a check for $50,000 without asking too many questions, because I was still drowning in grief and any excuse to feel useful was better than sitting alone with my memories. The investment, I said slowly.
Did you ever hear what happened to that money? Amanda pulled a folded piece of paper from her portfolio. I did some digging after you agreed to meet me.
Christine mentioned it at a company retreat last spring, joking about how easy it was to get you to sign off on things. The Duluth deal never existed. The money went into a joint account she and Derek opened specifically to hide assets from what she called future complications. Future complications? I think she meant your will.
Or maybe divorce.
She and Derek fight a lot more than they let on. Either way, they've been funneling money into accounts you don't know about for years. I stared at the paper in her hands, trying to process what I was hearing. My daughter hadn't just excluded me from her family. She'd been actively stealing from me, lying to my face while picking my pockets like a con artist working a mark. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why now? Amanda's jaw tightened. Because last week Christine fired me. Said I wasn't a culture fit anymore, whatever that means. Gave me 2 weeks severance, and a reminder that my non-compete clause prevented me from working at any other brokerage in the Twin Cities for 12 months. So this is revenge. Maybe partly. She met my eyes for the first time since sitting down. But it's also because I have a grandfather. He's 82, lives in a nursing home in Rochester, and I visit him every Sunday without fail. The way Christine talked about you, like you were an ATM with an expiration date, it made me sick. Nobody's grandfather deserves that. She slid the paper across the table. It was a printout of an email, dated 6 months ago, from Christine to Derek. Dad's getting suspicious about the renovation costs. We need to slow down for a few months. Let him settle. Maybe stage a family dinner. Remind him how much the kids love him. That usually opens the wallet back up. Also, reminder to call Patricia about the country club application. We need at least 2 more references, and Dad's obviously not an option. Can you imagine? Working class values on the membership form.
They'd laugh us out of the building. Working class values. The same phrase Derek had used to explain why I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner. There's more, Amanda said quietly. A lot more. I saved everything I could before they revoked my email access. Conversations about money, plans for the future, things they said about you when they thought no one was listening. And you're giving this to me because you deserve to know who your daughter really is. And because if you decide to do something about it, I want to help. I drove home with Amanda's portfolio on the passenger seat, its contents burning a hole in my consciousness.
Every few minutes, I glanced at it, half expecting it to burst into flames from the sheer concentrated betrayal it represented. 37 pages. That's how much evidence Amanda had compiled. Emails, text message screenshots, notes from overheard conversations, a timeline of financial requests matched against Christine's social media posts showing luxury purchases and exotic vacations. The pattern was devastating.
March 2021. I'd sent $25,000 for unexpected tax bills. 3 weeks later, Christine posted photos from a wine-tasting trip to Napa Valley. August 2021. $35,000 for emergency repairs to their house. The money actually went toward a down payment on a vacation property in Wisconsin that I'd never known about.
December 2021. $40,000 as a Christmas gift to help with the kids' expenses. Derek used it to buy a membership at the Minneapolis Golf Club, the same club where his family connections apparently mattered more than mine. Every gift I'd given in good faith had been a transaction to them. Every sacrifice I'd made was just another line item in their accounting of my usefulness. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten thousands of meals with Margaret, where we'd celebrated holidays and mourned losses and built a life together. Now it was covered in evidence that our daughter saw us as nothing more than funding sources with expiration dates. One email in particular kept drawing my attention.
Dated February 14th of this year, Valentine's Day. From Derek to someone named Marcus Whitfield. The old man's getting harder to manage since his wife died. Christine thinks we have maybe 3 to 5 years before he either runs out of money or starts asking too many questions. We need to accelerate the timeline. The trust funds for the kids are untouchable until they're 25. But if we can get him to add us as co-trustees, we can access the principal for educational expenses. Christine's working on softening him up.
A few more Saturday pancake sessions with the grandkids should do it. Saturday pancake sessions. The mornings I treasured more than anything.
The time I'd carved out specifically to build a relationship with Emma and Jack, to give them memories of their grandfather that would last long after I was gone. It had all been a manipulation, a tool to keep me compliant while they plotted how to extract every last dollar from my estate. I picked up my phone and called Richard Chen. "Harold? Is everything all right?
I need you to come to my house," I said, my voice strange and distant in my own ears. "Tonight, if possible. I have new information, and I need to know what my options are." "What kind of information?" I looked at the papers scattered across my table, 37 pages of proof that my daughter had become a stranger.
The kind that changes everything. Richard arrived at 7:30 p.m., still wearing his suit from the office. He brought a legal pad and his reading glasses, prepared for whatever I was about to show him. I didn't waste time with pleasantries.
"My daughter and her husband have been systematically defrauding me for years," I said, gesturing at the documents spread across the table. "They've hidden assets in secret accounts, lied about how they spent money I gave them, and apparently they've been planning to manipulate me into giving them control of my grandchildren's trust funds." Richard set down his briefcase and picked up the nearest paper, the Valentine's Day email about accelerating the timeline. His face went pale as he read. "Where did you get these?" "A former employee of Christine's, someone with a conscience and a grudge." I handed him the rest of the portfolio. "There's more, a lot more, enough to show a clear pattern of fraud and deception spanning at least 3 years." Richard read in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finally looked up, the professional neutrality was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like anger. "Harold, this is criminal. Some of these transactions could constitute wire fraud, potentially elder financial abuse, depending on how a prosecutor wanted to frame it. I'm not interested in sending my daughter to prison." "Then what are you interested in?" I walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where I'd imagined hanging that birdhouse with Emma and Jack. The purple paint was probably still drying in my garage, waiting for grandchildren who might never come back. I want to protect what's left of my estate from people who see me as a mark. I want to make sure that when I die, my money goes to people and causes that actually deserve it.
And I want my grandchildren to know the truth, eventually, when they're old enough to understand. All of that is doable, Richard said slowly.
But Harold, there's something else you need to consider. What? If Christine and Derek have been hiding assets and lying about their financial situation, there may be other people they've defrauded. The real estate deals Amanda mentioned, the investment opportunities. If those involved outside investors, we could be looking at securities fraud, conspiracy, maybe RICO charges if the pattern is extensive enough. You're saying my daughter might be running a criminal enterprise. I'm saying we need to investigate further before we know the full scope of what we're dealing with. Richard gathered the papers carefully, treating them like the evidence they might become. I know a forensic accountant. Someone who specializes in tracing hidden assets and fraudulent transactions. If you want, I can bring him in. Do it. It won't be cheap.
These kinds of investigations can run $50,000, $75,000, sometimes more depending on complexity. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. Richard, I've given my daughter nearly $500,000 over the last 13 years.
What's another $75,000 to find out exactly how badly she's been screwing me?
He nodded, tucking the portfolio into his briefcase. I'll make some calls tomorrow. In the meantime, don't contact Christine or Derek.
Don't give any indication that you know about these documents. If they realize we're investigating, they'll start destroying evidence. Understood. He paused at my front door, his hand on the knob. Harold, I have to ask. If this investigation reveals what I think it's going to reveal, how far are you willing to go? I thought about Emma's laugh, Jack's serious face.
The family dinners I'd never be invited to, the holidays I'd spend alone, the grandchildren growing up believing their grandfather wasn't good enough for their sophisticated lifestyle.
As far as it takes, I said.
I'm done being their victim. After Richard left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of 38 years of marriage and 64 years of life. The house felt different now, not empty, but waiting, pregnant with possibility. My phone buzzed, a text from Christine.
Dad, I hope you're doing okay. I know our conversation was difficult, but I truly believe this is best for everyone. The kids ask about you sometimes. I tell them Grandpa is busy with his own life right now. Maybe someday, when things are different, we can revisit the situation. Love. See. The kids ask about you sometimes.
She was using my grandchildren as bait, dangling the possibility of reconciliation to keep me compliant while she and Derek continued their scheme. I typed back, I understand. Take care of yourself. 3 words that meant nothing and everything. 3 words that would keep her confident, unsuspecting, while I built my case piece by piece. I walked to Margaret's photo and touched the frame gently.
You always said Christine had my stubbornness, I told her, but I think she got something else from me, too. The ability to plan, to wait, to move strategically when the stakes are high. Margaret smiled her eternal smile. The difference is, I use those skills to build things.
She uses them to destroy. I set the photo down and walked to my office, where my laptop waited with the spreadsheet I'd been building for days.
It was time to add Amanda's information to the timeline, to see the full picture of my daughter's betrayal. The numbers told a story more damning than any confession. $487,000 in documented support over 13 years. At least $150,000 hidden in secret accounts, based on the transactions Amanda had uncovered.
2 trust funds for my grandchildren, each holding $85,000, that Christine and Derek were planning to raid through a scheme to name themselves as co-trustees. A vacation property in Wisconsin worth approximately $200,000, purchased with money I'd thought was covering emergency repairs. A country club membership that cost $45,000 per year, funded entirely by gifts I'd given from my grandchildren's expenses. And behind it all, a daughter who called me her retirement fund, and a son-in-law who dismissed my life's work as blue-collar American dream stuff. I saved the spreadsheet and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, the forensic accountant would start digging. Within weeks, I'd know the full scope of my daughter's betrayal. And then I would decide exactly how to respond. But tonight, I allowed myself one small indulgence. One tiny act of defiance against the people who had stolen so much from me. I poured a glass of good whiskey, walked to my back porch, and raised it to the September stars.
You wanted to cut me out of your life, I said to the darkness. Fine, but you forgot something important. The night was silent, waiting. I'm the one who built everything you have. And I can tear it all down just as easily. The whiskey burned going down, warm and sharp and perfect. For the first time since that terrible Saturday conversation, I felt something other than pain. I felt power. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for Vincent Morrow to dismantle my daughter's carefully constructed web of lies. Vincent was exactly what Richard had promised. A forensic accountant with 30 years of experience tracing hidden money through corporate shells and offshore accounts. He'd worked fraud cases for the FBI, testified as an expert witness in 17 federal trials, and charged $450 an hour for his services. Worth every penny, as it turned out. We met in Richard's office on a Thursday morning in October, the leaves outside turning gold and red, while my illusions about family finished dying inside. Vincent was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of meticulous demeanor that suggested he alphabetized his sock drawer. He arrived with 2 banker's boxes and a laptop, spreading his findings across Richard's conference table like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Mr. Peterson, he began, adjusting his glasses. I've spent 3 weeks examining the financial records you provided, along with additional information obtained through legal discovery channels. What I found is extensive. How extensive? Vincent opened his laptop and projected a flowchart onto the wall screen. Lines and boxes and arrows connecting my bank accounts to a maze of entities I'd never heard of. Let me start with what we know. Over the past 5 years, you've transferred approximately $487,000 to your daughter and son-in-law through various mechanisms: direct gifts, loan forgiveness, payments on their behalf. This is the money you were aware of. And the money I wasn't aware of. Vincent clicked to the next slide. The flowchart expanded, new boxes appearing like tumors on a scan. There's another $312,000 that was extracted through methods you didn't authorize. Fraudulent invoices submitted to your company before you sold it, claiming expenses that were never incurred. Credit cards opened in your name without your knowledge, maxed out and then paid off from your accounts. Investment accounts where you were listed as a co-signer, but never actually signed anything. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. $312,000. Stolen, not given. Taken through forgery and fraud, while I was grieving my wife and trusting my daughter to be honest. How is that possible? I managed. I would have noticed credit cards I didn't open. The statements were redirected to a P.O. box in Minneapolis. Your daughter had power of attorney over some of your accounts during your wife's illness. Do you remember signing those documents? I did. Margaret's medical care had required so much paperwork, so many authorizations and forms and legal documents. Christine had offered to help, and I'd been grateful. Too grateful to read everything carefully, too trusting to question why my daughter needed access to accounts that had nothing to do with her mother's treatment. She used the medical POA to expand her access to other accounts, Vincent continued. By the time you revoked it after your wife's death, she'd already established alternative channels. The credit cards, the investment accounts, the fraudulent invoices, they were all set up during that 6-month window when you were focused on Margaret's care. I felt sick. Physically, viscerally sick. She waited until my wife was dying to steal from me. It appears that way, yes. Richard leaned forward, his face grim. Vincent, you mentioned fraudulent invoices. How did that work? Peterson Construction used several regular subcontractors during its final years of operation. 2 of those subcontractors, Midwest Finishing LLC and Premium Tile Solutions, submitted invoices totaling $187,000 for work that was never performed. Mr. Peterson's company paid those invoices in good faith. The money was deposited into accounts controlled by entities that trace back to Derek Whitmore. Derek created fake subcontractors to steal from my company. Not directly. The registered agents for both companies are Derek's father, Marcus Whitmore, and his brother, Tyler Whitmore. The scheme appears to have been a family operation. Marcus Whitmore, the name from Derek's Valentine's Day email, the man he'd been updating about, accelerating the timeline. Derek's whole family was in on this. Vincent nodded slowly. The evidence suggests a coordinated effort spanning at least 4 years. Marcus Whitmore has a background in commercial real estate, which gave him the knowledge to create convincing shell companies. Tyler Whitmore is a CPA who likely handled the accounting side. And Derek served as the primary conduit to your family, using his marriage to Christine to facilitate access. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer.
The conference room felt too small, too close, the walls pressing in like a trap I hadn't seen coming. My daughter married a con artist, and she's been helping him rob me blind for years.
That's one interpretation, Vincent said carefully. Another interpretation is that your daughter was the primary architect, and Derek's family provided the technical expertise.
The evidence doesn't clearly establish who initiated the scheme. Does it matter? For potential criminal prosecution, yes. For your estate planning purposes, Vincent shrugged. Probably not. Richard gave me an hour to compose myself before we continued.
I spent it in his private bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and staring at the stranger in the mirror. 64 years old, widowed,
Childless,
for all practical purposes, and apparently the victim of a fraud scheme that had been operating under my nose for half a decade. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind?
The answer was simple, and it made me hate myself almost as much as I hated them.
I'd wanted to believe. After Margaret died, Christine and the grandchildren were all I had left.
Every Saturday visit, every phone call, every request for money, they were proof that I still mattered to someone, that my life still had purpose. I'd paid for that illusion with my savings, my dignity, and my trust. When I returned to the conference room, Vincent had added more documents to his presentation. Bank statements, corporate filings, property records, the archaeology of a crime family. There are a few more things you need to see, he said. Some of them are particularly difficult.
I'm not sure anything could be more difficult than what you've already shown me. Vincent exchanged a glance with Richard. Then he clicked to a new slide. It was a screenshot of a text conversation between Christine and Derek, dated 3 weeks after Margaret's funeral. Christine, Dad's finally signing over the joint accounts. Said he couldn't bear to look at Mom's name on the statements anymore.
God, this is easier than I thought.
Derek. Perfect. Transfer $50K to the Cayman account before he notices. Tell him it's for the kids' education fund. Christine. Already done.
He cried when I told him how much Emma and Jack appreciate their grandpa's generosity. Didn't even ask to see paperwork.
Derek. You're amazing. 6 more months and we'll have enough for the yacht. Christine. Yacht first, then the house in Costa Rica.
By the time the old man dies, we'll be untouchable. I read the messages 3 times. Each time they heard exactly the same. The old man, that's what my daughter called me. Not dad, not father. The old man.
When did you obtain these messages? I asked, my voice flat. They were in the materials provided by your initial source. Amanda Reyes had access to Christine's cloud backup through a shared office system. Vincent paused.
Mr. Peterson, I know this is painful.
Show me the rest. Harold, Richard interjected, maybe we should take a break. Show me the rest. Vincent hesitated, then clicked forward. More messages. More emails, more evidence of a daughter who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between her and the lifestyle she believed she deserved.
There was an email to Derek's mother, Evelyn Whitmore, discussing how to manage Harold's expectations, so he'd keep funding their lifestyle without asking questions. There was a text thread about the best way to introduce estate planning conversations, to convince me to add them as co-trustees of the grandchildren's funds. There was a memo, an actual memo, formatted like a business document, titled Peterson Asset Acquisition Timeline, outlining a 5-year plan to extract every possible dollar from my accounts before my death.
And at the bottom of that memo, a section labeled Contingency Planning, which discussed what to do if I became difficult or started asking questions. If Harold shows signs of resistance, implement Phase 3, limited grandchild access. Studies show that elderly individuals with limited family contact are more susceptible to emotional manipulation. Gradually reduce visit frequency while emphasizing his role as provider. If necessary, threaten complete estrangement until compliance is achieved. Limited grandchild access. They planned this.
They'd studied me like a mark, identified my vulnerabilities, and designed a strategy specifically to exploit my love for Emma and Jack. The Christmas ban wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was Phase 3. The yacht, I said suddenly. Did they actually buy a yacht? Vincent clicked to a new document. A bill of sale from a marina in Fort Lauderdale. A 42-foot Catalina sailboat, purchased 18 months ago for $287,000.
Registered to an LLC based in Delaware called New Horizons Marine. The LLC is controlled by a holding company in the Caymans, which traces back to Marcus Whitmore. They bought a yacht with my money. With money that was, at various points,
Yours.
yes. I looked at the image on the screen. A sleek white boat cutting through turquoise water, probably taken from a promotional brochure.
My daughter and her husband owned a $250,000 yacht, while I'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches to save money for their emergencies. What else? I asked. What else did they buy? Vincent clicked through property records like a dealer shuffling cards. The vacation house in Wisconsin I'd already known about. A condo in Miami I hadn't known about. Investment properties in Phoenix and Austin generating rental income that never appeared on any tax return I'd seen. And finally, a document that made even Richard gasp. A life insurance policy. $2 million, with me as the insured and Christine as the sole beneficiary. I never authorized this, I said. No, the signature on the application is a forgery, matching samples from the POA documents Christine filed during your wife's illness. The premiums have been paid from an account in your name that you don't control. They took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge. It appears so. I stared at the document, at my forged signature, at the $2 million death benefit that would transform my daughter into a wealthy woman the moment I stopped breathing.
Richard, I said slowly, I want to file criminal charges. Harold, we discussed this. I know what we discussed. I didn't want to send my daughter to prison.
But this, I gestured at the screen, at the evidence of a conspiracy that went far beyond simple greed.
This is different. A forged life insurance policy. Fake subcontractors stealing from my company.
Credit cards opened in my name without consent. This isn't family dysfunction. This is organized crime. Vincent cleared his throat. If I may, Mr. Peterson, filing criminal charges would certainly be justified based on this evidence. However, it would also alert Christine and Derek that they're under investigation. Given the offshore accounts and the complexity of their asset structure, they'd likely have time to move money beyond reach before any prosecution could freeze their holdings. So, what do you suggest? Complete the investigation first. We're close to tracing all the hidden accounts and properties. Another few weeks, and we'll have a comprehensive picture of exactly what they've taken and where it's hidden. Then you can make informed decisions about criminal referrals, civil litigation, or other remedies. Other remedies. Vincent looked at Richard. Richard looked at me. There are ways to recover assets that don't involve the criminal justice system, Richard said carefully. Civil forfeiture, creditor claims, strategic bankruptcy petitions, and of course, changes to your estate plan that would prevent them from benefiting after your death. They're already getting $2 million from the life insurance policy. Not necessarily. If the policy was obtained through fraud, it can be voided. The insurance company has a significant interest in not paying fraudulent claims. They'd likely cooperate with an investigation. I walked to the window, looking out at the St. Paul skyline. Somewhere across those buildings, in a suburb I'd helped them afford, my daughter was probably planning her next move, her next manipulation, her next extraction from the father she'd reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet. How much money did they really take? I asked. Total. Everything. Vincent consulted his notes. Documented transfers from your accounts, including the fraudulent methods, $799,000. Additional estimated value of assets purchased with those funds, accounting for appreciation, approximately $1.4 million. Lost interest and investment returns if that money had remained in your accounts, another $200,000, conservatively. So they've cost me roughly $1.6 million over the past 5 years. That's the current estimate, yes. We may find more as the investigation continues. $1.6 million. More than a third of what I'd earned from selling my company. More than I'd ever imagined giving away, even to family. And in exchange, I've been called the old man in text messages and banned from Christmas dinner for not being sophisticated enough. There's one more thing, Vincent said quietly, something I found this morning that I haven't had time to fully investigate. Tell me. He clicked to a final document, an email from Marcus Whitmore to Derek, dated just 2 weeks ago. Harold Problem Son. I've consulted with our contact at the insurance company.
The policy is ironclad as long as he dies of natural causes within the next 3 years.
After that, the contestability period expires and Christine collects regardless of any fraud claims. Given his age and the stress you've described, 3 years seems manageable.
But if you want to accelerate the timeline further, I have some ideas we should discuss in person. Nothing on email. Let's talk this weekend. Dad. The conference room went silent. They're discussing my death, I said, the words distant and strange. My daughter's family is discussing how to accelerate my death. Richard stood up. Harold, this changes everything. This isn't just fraud anymore. This could be conspiracy to commit murder. We don't know that, Vincent cautioned.
The email is ambiguous. Accelerate the timeline. Could mean what? Sending me on stressful vacations. Adding anxiety to my life. Making sure I die of a heart attack before the insurance company can investigate their forgery. I turned away from the window, my decision made. Richard, I want you to contact the FBI. Today. This has gone beyond estate planning and civil recovery. These people are planning to kill me for an insurance payout. Are you sure? Once federal law enforcement is involved. My daughter is plotting my murder with her in-laws. Yes, I'm sure. I gathered my coat and walked toward the door, then paused. And Richard? Start preparing a new will. I want everything in order before I meet with the FBI.
Just in case they're further along in their timeline than we think. Special Agent Dana Reyes, no relation to Amanda, as she made clear in our first handshake, occupied a corner office on the 7th floor of the FBI's Minneapolis field office. The walls were lined with commendations and photographs, a career's worth of bringing down people who thought they were above the law. She was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s, maybe, with sharp eyes and the kind of patient stillness that suggested she'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. Mr. Peterson, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Richard Chen tells me you have evidence of a multi-year fraud scheme with potential conspiracy elements. That's the polite way of putting it. What's the impolite way? My daughter and her in-laws have been stealing from me for 5 years and now they're discussing how to speed up my death so they can collect a $2 million life insurance policy they forged my signature to obtain. Agent Reyes didn't blink. In her line of work, family betrayal was probably Tuesday. Walk me through it. From the beginning. I spent the next 3 hours doing exactly that. The Saturday pancakes. Christine's announcement that I wasn't welcome at Christmas. The financial documents I'd discovered. Amanda's evidence. Vincent's forensic investigation. And finally, Marcus Whitmore's email about accelerating the timeline. Agent Reyes took notes throughout, asking occasional clarifying questions, but mostly just listening. By the time I finished, the afternoon sun had shifted across her office, casting long shadows over the evidence folders spread across her desk. Mr. Peterson, she said finally, I've worked financial crimes for 18 years. Elder fraud cases are unfortunately common. What you're describing, though, the scope, the planning, the coordination across multiple family members, this is unusually sophisticated. Is that your way of saying you believe me? It's my way of saying this warrants a full investigation. She closed her notebook. However, I need to be honest with you about something. Even with strong evidence, cases like this are complicated. The people involved are family members. Juries are reluctant to convict parents, children, spouses, especially when the victims are still alive and the conspiracy element is based on ambiguous emails. Accelerating the timeline seems pretty unambiguous to me. To you and me, yes. To a defense attorney, it's a discussion about financial planning that could mean 100 different things. She leaned forward. I'm not saying we won't pursue this. I'm saying that building a prosecutable case will take time, months, possibly years. And during that time, the subjects will need to remain unaware that they're under investigation. So I just go back to my life and pretend everything's normal. For now, yes. We'll want to monitor their communications, track their financial movements, maybe introduce some controlled scenarios to see how they respond. If they're truly planning something harmful, they'll eventually reveal it in ways we can document. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the weight of everything I'd learned. Agent Reyes, these people are already inside my life. They know where I live. They have access to my accounts. They've been manipulating me for years. How am I supposed to act normal around people who are planning my death? You're not. I'm going to assign a technical team to sweep your house for surveillance devices. If they've been monitoring your communications, we need to know. And I'm going to give you a secure phone that they can't trace. She pulled a card from her desk drawer. This is my direct line. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me.
Day or night.
You think they're already watching me? I think people who forge life insurance policies and create fake subcontractors are capable of a lot of things.
Better to be paranoid than dead. The words hung in the air between us, a reminder that this wasn't just a financial dispute anymore. This was survival. The FBI technical team arrived at my house the next morning at 7 a.m. sharp. 3 agents in unmarked vehicles, carrying cases of equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. Mr. Peterson, I'm Agent Collins. We're going to need you to step outside while we conduct the sweep. I waited on my porch for 2 hours, drinking coffee and watching the October leaves fall while strangers searched my home for evidence that my daughter was spying on me. Normal Tuesday. Agent Collins emerged at 9:15, his face carefully neutral in a way that told me everything I needed to know. We found 3 devices, he said. 2 audio transmitters, 1 in your kitchen, 1 in your bedroom, and a GPS tracker attached to your truck. The coffee went cold in my hand. Where in my kitchen? Behind your refrigerator. It's a commercial-grade unit, designed to blend in with household electronics. Someone with access to your home installed it deliberately. Behind my refrigerator, 3 feet from where I'd stood every morning, talking to Margaret's photo, sharing my thoughts and plans with what I believed was empty air. How long have they been there? Based on the model and battery depletion, the kitchen device has been active for at least 8 months. The bedroom unit is newer, maybe 3 months. The GPS tracker looks like it was installed within the last 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Right around the time I'd started asking questions about the financial documents. They'd known. This whole time, they'd known I was investigating them. Can you trace who installed these devices? The equipment is commercially available. Anyone with $500 and an internet connection could purchase it. No serial numbers, no identifying features. Collins handed me a sealed evidence bag containing the 3 devices. We've documented the installation locations and removed the units for analysis. Your home is clean now. For now. For now, he agreed. I'd recommend changing your locks. Maybe installing a security system that only you control. And Mr. Peterson, until this investigation is resolved, you should assume that anything you say in the presence of your family members is being recorded. After the FBI team left, I walked through my house like a stranger, seeing it with new eyes. The kitchen where I'd discussed my will changes with Richard on the phone. The bedroom where I'd cried myself to sleep on the anniversary of Margaret's death, pouring out my grief to the darkness. They'd heard everything. Every vulnerable moment. Every private thought. And they'd use that information to stay 1 step ahead of me. My phone buzzed. A text from Christine. Dad, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. The kids made you a Halloween card. Can we drop it off this weekend? A Halloween card. How thoughtful. How normal. How perfectly calculated to remind me of what I was losing while they monitored my response. I typed back. That would be nice. Saturday afternoon? Perfect. See you at 2. Love you. Love you. From the woman who'd called me the old man and discussed accelerating my death. I set down the phone and walked to my office, where Richard had couriered over the draft of my new will that morning. It was time to stop reacting and start planning. The new will was a work of art, 47 pages of carefully structured provisions designed to ensure that not 1 penny of my estate would ever reach Christine, Derek, or anyone connected to them. The house would go to Habitat for Humanity to be sold with proceeds funding construction projects for low-income families. My investment accounts would establish the Margaret Peterson Memorial Scholarship at the University of Minnesota, supporting first-generation college students in engineering and construction management. The life insurance policies I'd actually authorized would benefit the American Cancer Society, in Margaret's memory, and the trust funds for Emma and Jack. Those stayed intact, but with new conditions. The children would receive their inheritance at age 30, not 25 as originally planned, and only if they'd had no financial relationship with their parents for at least 5 years prior. An independent trustee, chosen by Richard from a vetted list, would manage the funds until distribution. Christine and Derek would have no access, no influence,
no ability to manipulate their children's inheritance.
If the kids wanted their grandfather's money, they'd have to earn it by breaking free of their parents' corruption. It was harsh. I knew it was harsh. But after everything I'd learned, it was also necessary.
I signed the documents that afternoon, with Richard and Vincent as witnesses. The paperwork would be filed with the county clerk by end of business, creating an official record that couldn't be altered or destroyed. "There's something else," Richard said as we finished the signing. "Agent Reyes called me this morning. She's been reviewing the surveillance footage from the marina in Fort Lauderdale, the one where the yacht is docked. And Derek and Marcus Whitmore visited 2 weeks ago.
They met with a man named Carlos Vega, who apparently has connections to certain pharmaceutical suppliers in South America." I felt the blood drain from my face.
Pharmaceutical suppliers? Prescription medications that can cause heart attacks if administered incorrectly.
Drugs that are nearly undetectable in autopsy toxicology screens. Richard's voice was flat, professional, but I could see the anger burning behind his eyes. Agent Reyes is expanding the investigation.
They're treating this as a potential murder for hire conspiracy now, not just financial fraud. Murder for hire. My daughter and her husband were trying to hire someone to kill me. How close are they to actually doing it? We don't know.
But Reyes is recommending enhanced protection.
Maybe a safe house until the investigation is complete. I'm not hiding in a safe house, Richard. I'm 64 years old, and I'm not spending what might be my last months on Earth, locked in some government facility, while my daughter plots my death. Then what do you want to do? I looked at the signed will on his desk, at the documents, that
would ensure my money went to people and causes that deserved it.
Then I looked at the secure phone Agent Reyes had given me, sitting silent in my pocket like a lifeline I hadn't yet needed. "I want to finish what I started," I said. "I want them to know that I know, and I want to watch their whole corrupt empire collapse around them. That's dangerous, Harold. So is letting them control the timeline." I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in weeks. They've been manipulating me for years because I never fought back. I smiled and wrote checks and pretended not to notice when things didn't add up.
That ends now. What are you planning? Saturday, Christine is bringing the kids over to deliver a Halloween card. It's probably a reconnaissance mission. See if I suspect anything. Gauge how compliant I'm feeling. I'm going to give them exactly what they expect. The confused old man, grateful for crumbs of attention, ready to open his wallet at the slightest hint of need. And then I'm going to start feeding them false information through the new listening devices the FBI is going to install in my house. Let them think I'm planning to add them back to the will. Let them think I've forgotten my suspicions. Let them get comfortable. Richard smiled grimly. "You're running a counterintelligence operation against your own daughter. I'm protecting myself from people who want me dead. If that requires playing their game better than they do, so be it." Saturday arrived gray and cold, the first real taste of Minnesota winter settling over Spokane. I spent the morning preparing, not pancake batter this time, but a performance. The confused elderly father, the lonely widower desperate for connection, the walking ATM who'd do anything for a few hours with his grandchildren. Christine arrived at exactly 2 p.m., the kids bouncing out of her silver Audi with the energy only Halloween season could inspire. Emma was dressed as a princess, her costume clearly expensive enough to have funded a week of my groceries. Jack wore a dinosaur outfit that probably cost more than my first suit. "Grandpa." Emma launched herself into my arms, and for a moment, just a moment, I forgot that her mother was trying to kill me for an insurance payout. For a moment, she was just my granddaughter, warm and alive and exactly where she belonged. "There's my favorite princess," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "And look at this ferocious dinosaur." "Should I be scared?" "I'm a T-Rex," Jack announced solemnly. "But don't worry, Grandpa. I only eat bad guys. If only you knew, buddy. If only you knew." Christine stood by her car, watching us with the calculated warmth I now recognized as performance. "Dad, you look good. Have you been sleeping better? Some nights are harder than others." I set Emma down and shepherded the kids toward the house. "Come inside." I made hot chocolate. The visit lasted 2 hours. Normal conversation, normal laughter. Emma showed me her reading progress. Jack demonstrated his dinosaur roar. We carved a pumpkin on the kitchen table, making a mess that would have driven Margaret crazy, but felt exactly right for a Halloween Saturday. Through it all, Christine watched me with eyes I now saw clearly for the first time. Calculating,
Assessing, looking for cracks in my composure that might indicate suspicion. I gave her nothing. When they prepared to leave, Christine lingered while the kids ran to the car. Dad, I know things have been difficult between us lately.
the Christmas situation, the distance. I want you to know that Derek and I have been talking, and we think maybe we were too harsh. Too harsh.
As if banning me from family gatherings was a minor social oversight rather than a calculated manipulation. I appreciate that, honey. We were thinking maybe you could come to Thanksgiving this year. The kids would love it, and
Well, family is important. We shouldn't forget that. Family is important. The woman who'd called me her retirement fund wanted to lecture me about family. That sounds wonderful, I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. I'd like that very much. Great. Christine's smile was radiant and completely hollow. I'll send you the details next week. And Dad, if you ever need anything, financial advice, help with planning for the future, Derek's really good at that stuff. We're here for you. Financial advice, help with planning. Translation, we want back into your accounts. We want to know what you're leaving us in your will. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Tell Derek I said hello.
I stood on my porch and watched the silver Audi disappear down my street, carrying my grandchildren back to a house where their parents plotted their grandfather's murder.
Then I walked inside
And picked up the secure phone. Agent Reyes, it's Harold Peterson. They just left. They're trying to get back into my life. Probably realize the bugs went silent and want to re-establish access. Expected.
How did you handle it? I gave them what they wanted. The grateful old man, happy to be invited to Thanksgiving.
Good. We've made progress on the Carlos Vega connection. Turns out he has prior convictions for pharmaceutical diversion and assault. If Derek and Marcus are working with him, they're serious about moving forward. How serious? A pause. Serious enough that I'm stationing an unmarked vehicle outside your house starting tonight.
Just in case.
Just in case they decide to accelerate their accelerated timeline. Something like that. I could hear papers shuffling on her end. Mr. Peterson, I want to be direct with you.
Based on what we've uncovered, I believe your daughter and her husband present an immediate threat to your safety.
The smart move would be to go somewhere they can't find you until we've built enough evidence for arrests. And the stubborn move? Stay exactly where you are and trust that we can protect you while gathering that evidence. I looked at Margaret's
photo on my mantle, at the life we'd built together in this house, at the memories embedded in every wall and floor and window.
I'm staying, I said. This is my home. I'm not letting them take that away from me, too. Then we'll make sure they don't take anything else. Agent Reyes's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I promise you that, Mr. Peterson.
These people will face justice for what they've done. I believed her. For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed that justice was actually possible. But I also knew something Agent Reyes didn't. Something I'd learned from 40 years of construction, of building things from nothing, of taking on projects everyone said were impossible. Sometimes you couldn't wait for other people to solve your problem. Sometimes you had to build your own solution. And I was just getting started. The next 3 weeks were an education in deception.
Agent Reyes introduced me to a world I'd never known existed, the world of counterintelligence, where nothing was what it seemed, and every conversation was a chess move in a game your opponent didn't know you were playing. The FBI installed new surveillance equipment in my house on November 3rd, not to spy on me this time, but to broadcast carefully crafted lies to whoever was listening on Christine's end.
The key is consistency, Agent Reyes explained during our planning session. You need to behave exactly like the person they think you are. Confused, lonely, eager to reconnect. Any deviation from that pattern will alert them that something's changed. And the false information? We'll feed it gradually. Phone conversations that happen to mention your estate planning. Visitors who discuss your finances in earshot of the devices we know they're monitoring. Nothing too obvious, nothing too sudden. Just a slow drip of exactly what they want to hear. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Christine and Derek wanted back into my will. They wanted access to my accounts, control over my decisions, leverage they could use to extract more money before their ultimate play. So I would give them hope. I would let them believe their manipulation was working. And while they celebrated their success, The FBI would be documenting every move they made.
Richard Chen coordinated the legal side, preparing documents that looked authentic but contained carefully placed inconsistencies. Breadcrumbs that would prove, if it ever came to court, that Christine and Derek had been shown fraudulent information
and acted on it anyway.
This is a modification to your existing will, Richard said, sliding papers across his desk during our November 5th meeting. The words were spoken loudly enough for the recording devices in my house to capture when I reviewed the documents at home that evening. It restores Christine as primary beneficiary and adds Derek as co-trustee of the grandchildren's funds. The documents were real. The signatures were mine.
But buried in the fine print was a clause that invalidated the entire modification if any beneficiary was found to have engaged in fraudulent, coercive, or criminal conduct toward the testator. A poison pill, hidden in plain sight.
When do I tell Christine about this? I asked, playing my role. I'd recommend sharing the news at Thanksgiving. Family gathering, positive emotions, the perfect setting to discuss estate planning. Perfect setting, indeed.
Though not for the reasons Christine would assume. The Thanksgiving invitation arrived via text on November 8th, complete with a detailed schedule that made clear exactly what kind of event this would be.
Dad, so excited to have you for Thanksgiving. We're doing a formal dinner this year, 3 p.m. arrival, cocktails at 3:30, dinner at 5. Derek's parents will be there, along with some of our closest friends. Dress code is business casual.
Let me know if you need anything.
Derek's parents, Marcus and Evelyn Whitmore, the architects of the fraud scheme, would be sitting across the table from me. The man who discussed accelerating my timeline would be passing me the cranberry sauce.
Looking forward to it. I typed back.
Should I bring anything? Just yourself. And maybe that bottle of wine you've been saving. Derek says you mentioned a nice Bordeaux last year. The Bordeaux.
A 1998 Chateau Margaux that Margaret and I had bought on our 30th anniversary trip to France. I'd been saving it for a special occasion. Emma's wedding, perhaps, or Jack's college graduation. Something that would honor Margaret's memory.
Christine wanted me to bring it to a dinner where her in-laws would be finalizing plans for my murder. I'll bring the wine, I replied.
Can't wait to see everyone.
The rage I felt typing those words was unlike anything I'd experienced in 64 years of life. Cold and patient and absolutely certain. They wanted the Bordeaux, fine. They could have it.
But they'd choke on every drop. The 2 weeks before Thanksgiving passed in a blur of preparation. Agent Reyes coordinated with the Minneapolis field office to establish surveillance on all the key players. Phone taps, financial monitoring,
physical observation teams tracking Derek and Marcus's movements. The picture that emerged was damning. Marcus Whitmore made 3 more visits to Carlos Vega in the days following Halloween.
Each meeting was photographed, documented,
added to a file that was growing thicker by the hour.
Vega, it turned out, had connections to a pharmaceutical distribution network that specialized in hard-to-trace medications, the kind that could stop a heart without leaving obvious evidence.
Derek, meanwhile, was liquidating assets. The vacation property in Wisconsin went on the market November 10th. The Miami condo followed 3 days later.
Money was moving through their offshore accounts at an accelerating pace, consolidating into positions that would be difficult to seize once everything went public.
They're preparing for something, Agent Reyes told me during our November 15th briefing. The asset movements, the meetings with Vega, the urgency, it all suggests they're planning to act soon. How soon? My guess, they want this resolved before the end of the year. The life insurance policy has a 2-year contestability window that expires in January.
If you die after that date, their fraud becomes much harder to prosecute. So I need to die before January. That appears to be their timeline. Yes. I sat with that information for a long moment. 6 weeks.
My daughter had given me 6 weeks to live. What happens at Thanksgiving? I asked. We'll have agents in place outside the house. Your phone will have live monitoring. Anything that sounds like an imminent threat, and we move in.
But Harold, she paused, choosing her words carefully. If they're planning to act at Thanksgiving, it probably won't be obvious. Poison in your food, something slipped into your drink. These things can take hours or days to show effects. By the time anyone realizes what happened, the evidence could be gone. You're saying I shouldn't eat anything.
I'm saying be extremely careful. Stick to sealed bottles you open yourself. Don't leave your drink unattended. And if you start feeling unwell, anything at all, signal us immediately. How do I signal? She handed me a small device that looked like a car key fob. Press the button twice. We'll be through the door in under 2 minutes. 2 minutes. My life might depend on a 2-minute response time. One more thing, Agent Reyes said. We've been analyzing the communications we've intercepted. Christine and Derek don't just want you dead. They want it to look natural. They want to be the grieving daughter and son-in-law, collecting their inheritance while the community offers sympathy. So they'll be charming, attentive, the perfect hosts. Exactly. Which means your job is to be the perfect guest. Grateful, trusting, completely unsuspecting. Let them believe their performance is working. Let them relax. And then we see what they do when they think they've won. I spent Thanksgiving morning alone in my house, preparing for what might be the most important performance of my life. The suit I'd chosen was the same navy blue I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, appropriate for a formal dinner, but also carrying a weight my daughter wouldn't understand. This was the suit I wore to say goodbye to people I loved. Today, I was saying goodbye to the daughter I'd thought I knew. The Bordeaux sat on my kitchen counter, its label faded with age. 25 years old. Margaret and I had been 42 when we bought it. Still young enough to believe we had forever. Still naive enough to think our children would carry our values into the future. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I said to her photo. I know this isn't what you wanted, but she's not the person we raised anymore. Maybe she never was. The photo smiled back, offering no judgment. Margaret had always been better at forgiveness than me. She'd have found a way to reach Christine, to understand her, to pull her back from the edge. But Margaret was gone, and I was the only one left to face what our daughter had become. At 2:15 p.m., I drove toward Minneapolis with the Bordeaux in my passenger seat and the FBI's panic button in my pocket. The highway stretched before me, mile after mile of Minnesota farmland, giving way to suburbs, giving way to the kind of neighborhood where people measured success by square footage and country club memberships. Christine's house blazed with light when I arrived, every window glowing warm against the November gray. Cars lined the driveway, the Whitmore's Lexus, several vehicles I didn't recognize, and Derek's BMW positioned like a trophy at the front of the line. I parked on the street and sat for a moment, gathering myself. This was it. The culmination of 3 months of investigation, planning, and heartbreak. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine everything, whether the FBI had enough evidence to move forward, whether Christine and Derek would face justice, whether I would survive to see my grandchildren grow up. No pressure. I picked up the wine, checked that the panic button was secure in my pocket, and walked toward the front door. Christine opened it before I could knock, her smile wide and welcoming and utterly false. Dad! You made it. Come in, come in. Everyone's so excited to see you. The house smelled like roasting turkey and expensive candles, the same vanilla scent that had filled the air on the day she'd first told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas. Ironic, really, that conversation had set everything in motion. And now here I was, invited back to the scene of my original exclusion. The living room was full of faces, some I recognized, others I didn't. Derek stood by the fireplace with his father, both men holding crystal glasses of what looked like whiskey. Marcus Whitmore caught my eye and raised his glass in greeting, his smile carrying all the warmth of a snake watching a mouse. Harold. Derek crossed the room with his hand extended, the picture of a devoted son-in-law. So glad you could join us. Christine's been talking about nothing else all week. Wouldn't miss it, I said, shaking his hand and resisting the urge to break his fingers. Family is everything. Family is everything, Derek agreed. Let me take that wine. What a beautiful bottle. Is this the Margot? From our trip to France. Margaret and I always said we'd open it for something special. Well, this is certainly special. Derek held the bottle up to the light, examining the label. I'll make sure it gets the treatment it deserves. Decanting, proper temperature, the works. I watched him carry the bottle toward the kitchen, where Evelyn Whitmore was supervising something on the stove. The wine would be out of my sight for the rest of the evening. Whatever they put in it, I'd never know until it was too late. Good thing I had no intention of drinking any. Grandpa, Emma burst out of nowhere, launching herself at my legs with the force of a small torpedo. You came. Mommy said you might not come, but I said you would, because you promised. I knelt down to her level, drinking in her face like a man dying of thirst. Whatever happened tonight, whatever her parents had done, this child was innocent. She loved her grandfather without conditions or calculations. That love was real, even if nothing else in this house was. I always keep my promises, I told her. Where's your brother? Playing video games with Grandpa Marcus. He got Jack a new dinosaur game. Grandpa Marcus. The man planning my murder was playing video games with my grandson, building the relationship that would eventually replace me. That sounds fun, I said, keeping my voice steady. Maybe I can watch him play later. Christine appeared at my elbow, her hand resting on my shoulder with practiced affection. Dad, let me introduce you to some of our friends. Everyone's been dying to meet the man who built Peterson Construction. Dying. Interesting word choice. I spent the next hour being paraded through a room full of strangers, each introduction more exhausting than the last. Investment bankers, real estate developers, country club members whose names I forgot as soon as I heard them. Christine introduced me as my father, the entrepreneur. Her voice carrying notes of pride I might have believed 3 months ago. Now I heard it for what it was. Marketing. She was establishing my legitimacy, building a narrative of a close family relationship, laying groundwork for the grieving daughter performance she'd eventually deliver. At 5 p.m. sharp, Evelyn Whitmore announced that dinner was served. The dining room table stretched to accommodate 14 people, place cards directing us to our assigned seats. I was positioned at Christine's right hand, directly across from Marcus Whitmore, close enough to study, close enough to monitor, close enough to kill, if someone had slipped something into the water pitcher. The turkey was golden and perfect. The side dishes were arranged like a magazine spread, and the Bordeaux sat decanted in a crystal container at Derek's end of the table, its deep red color catching the candlelight. Before we eat, Derek said, standing with his glass raised, I'd like to propose a toast. To family, both the family we're born with and the family we choose. Harold, we're so grateful to have you here tonight. To Harold, the table echoed. I raised my glass of water and pretended to drink. Let the games begin. Dinner was an exercise in sustained performance. I ate the turkey, carved from the bird in front of me, impossible to tamper with ahead of time. I avoided the gravy, the stuffing, anything that had been prepared out of sight. I drank water from a sealed bottle I'd brought myself, claiming doctor's orders about hydration. Through it all, I watched, studied, catalogued. Marcus Whitmore spent the meal directing pointed questions my way, probing for information about my health, my finances, my plans for the future. Each question was wrapped in concern, delivered with the warmth of a caring friend. Harold, Christine mentioned you've been thinking about your estate planning lately. Such an important topic at our age. Have you considered working with a proper financial advisor? I've got a good lawyer, I said. Richard Chen. He's been helping me sort through things. Richard Chen. Marcus nodded, filing the name away. I've heard good things. Though I must say, family should be involved in these decisions. You want to make sure your wishes are respected, that the people you love are taken care of. That's exactly what I want, I agreed. To make sure the right people get what they deserve. The conversation shifted to other topics. Business deals, vacation plans, the kind of small talk that filled hours without saying anything meaningful. I nodded along, laughed at the right moments, played the grateful father enjoying a holiday with his loving family. But inside, I was counting. Counting the glasses of wine Derek poured. Counting the trips Marcus made to the kitchen. Counting the minutes until I could escape this theater of lies and breathe clean air again. At 7:30, Christine stood and tapped her glass for attention. Everyone, I have an announcement. Dad, this is really for you. The room went quiet. I felt the panic button in my pocket, heavy and reassuring. These past few months have been complicated. Christine continued, her voice carrying just the right amount of emotion. There were some misunderstandings, some hurt feelings, things that were said that shouldn't have been said. But family is about forgiveness. Family is about coming together even when it's hard. She paused, wiping her eyes with a gesture so practiced I wanted to applaud. Dad, I want you to know that you'll always have a place at our table. You'll always be Emma and Jack's grandfather. And no matter what happens, we love you. We're grateful for everything you've done for us. The table erupted in murmurs of approval. Marcus raised his glass. Derek beamed like a proud husband, and Christine looked at me with eyes that sparkled with tears, tears that dried remarkably quickly once she gauged my reaction. "Thank you, honey," I said, standing to embrace her. "That means more than you know." As I held my daughter, I thought about the life insurance policy with my forged signature, the emails discussing how to accelerate my timeline, the meetings with Carlos Vega and his untraceable pharmaceuticals. This was her victory speech, the moment she believed she'd won. She had no idea that her defeat had already begun. Dessert arrived at 8:15 p.m. A pumpkin pie that Evelyn Whitmore presented with the pride of someone who'd spent hours in the kitchen, though I'd noticed earlier that the packaging from a high-end bakery was still visible in the recycling bin. "Harold, you have to try a slice," she insisted, already cutting into the pie before I could respond. "It's my grandmother's recipe. I made it specially for tonight." The slice she placed before me was generous, topped with a swirl of whipped cream that seemed slightly different from what she'd served everyone else. Thicker, perhaps, more carefully applied. "That looks wonderful," I said, "but I'm afraid I'm stuffed." The turkey was incredible. "Oh, come on, Dad." Christine leaned in, her voice carrying that concerned daughter tone she'd perfected. "You barely ate anything at dinner. At least have a few bites." For me? I studied the pie, the whipped cream, my daughter's face. 3 months ago, I would have eaten it without question. Anything to please her. Anything to maintain the relationship I thought we had. Now I saw the calculation behind her smile. The way Derek and Marcus exchanged glances across the table. The subtle tension in Evelyn's shoulders as she waited for me to pick up my fork. "Actually," I said, pushing the plate away gently, "my doctor's been after me about sugar. Pre-diabetic, he says, I should probably skip it." "Since when?" Christine's voice sharpened almost imperceptibly. "You've never mentioned diabetes before." "Recent development. One of the joys of getting older." I patted my stomach. "He wants me to lose 20 pounds by the new year. No desserts, no alcohol, lots of walking. You know how it is." The table fell silent for a beat too long. I watched the calculations flicker across Marcus Whitmore's face, the plan derailing, the carefully prepared moments slipping away. "That's very responsible, Harold," Marcus said finally, recovering his composure. "Health has to come first. Though I must say, one small piece on Thanksgiving wouldn't hurt anything. Better safe than sorry." I smiled at him, holding his gaze until he looked away. "At my age, you can't be too careful." Christine reached for my plate. "Well, if Dad's not eating it, someone should." "Derek, you want an extra slice?" "I'll take it." Derek accepted the plate, my plate, with my specially prepared whipped cream, and took an enthusiastic bite. "Delicious, Mom. Best pie you've ever made." I watched him chew and swallow, wondering if the poison had been meant specifically for me, or if it was in the whole pie. The fact that Derek was eating it suggested the latter wasn't true. Whatever they'd planned, it had been targeted. The panic button felt heavier in my pocket. Coffee was served in the living room at 9 p.m. The children had been sent to play upstairs, their laughter occasionally drifting down like music from another world. A world where grandparents weren't targets, and parents didn't plot murders over holiday dinners. I accepted a cup of coffee, then set it on the side table without drinking. Too easy to contaminate, too risky. "Dad, you're not drinking your coffee either." Christine settled beside me on the couch, her proximity feeling less like affection and more like surveillance. "Are you feeling okay? You've been so careful about everything tonight." "Just being mindful. The prediabetes thing has me paranoid. You should see a specialist. Derek's cousin is an endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic. I could get you a referral." "That's kind of you, honey." I patted her hand, the gesture feeling foreign against my palm. "I'll think about it." Marcus approached with a glass of what looked like brandy, positioning himself in the armchair across from us. "Harold, I've been meaning to ask. Christine mentioned you might be updating your estate planning." "Such an important process. Are you working with good advisors?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications neither of us acknowledged. "Richard Chen's been helping me," I said. "Good lawyer. Very thorough." Thorough is important. Though family should be involved in these decisions, don't you think? Make sure everyone's interests are aligned. Everyone's interests. I let the phrase sit for a moment. "What interests do you think need aligning, Marcus?" Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition that I wasn't as confused as I appeared. He recovered quickly, but the mask had slipped. Just making sure you're being taken care of. Christine worries about you, living alone in that big house. We all do. I appreciate the concern, but I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I've been making some changes lately,
getting my affairs in order. You know how it is at my age. You start thinking about legacy, about what you want to leave behind. And what do you want to leave behind, Harold? The question was a trap, baited with false casualness. I could see Christine leaning in, Derek pausing his conversation across the room to listen. The truth, I said quietly. I want to leave behind the truth about who people really are. Silence. Marcus's brandy glass froze halfway to his lips. Christine's hand went still on my arm. That's philosophical, Marcus said finally. What do you mean by that? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Agent Reyes. Vega spotted outside, silver sedan, north end of block. Do not leave alone. Acknowledge. I glanced at the message, then back at Marcus's face. He was watching me with an intensity that no longer pretended to be friendly. Everything all right, Dad? Christine asked. Fine. Just a reminder about my medication. I typed back a quick confirmation, then pocketed the phone. Actually, I should probably head out soon. Long drive back, and the doctor wants me getting more sleep. You can't leave yet. Christine's voice carried an edge of panic. We haven't even had a chance to really talk. And the kids will want to say goodbye properly. Let the man rest if he needs to, Derek interjected, moving closer. Though Harold, if you're too tired to drive, you're welcome to stay in the guest room. No sense risking an accident. Stay in the guest room. Alone. In a house full of people who wanted me dead, with Carlos Vega waiting outside in a silver sedan. That's generous, but I'll be fine. Just need to pace myself. I stood and the room shifted around me. Christine rising, Derek blocking the path to the front door, Marcus setting down his brandy with deliberate precision. Actually, Dad, I insist. Christine's hand closed around my arm, her grip tighter than necessary. You look pale. Have you been feeling okay? Maybe we should check your blood pressure. I feel fine. You don't look fine. Derek, doesn't Dad look pale to you? He does look a little off. Derek moved closer, his bulk suddenly seeming less soft and more threatening. Harold, why don't you sit back down? Let us take care of you. The panic button was in my right pocket. Christine had my left arm. Derek was approaching from the front. Marcus had risen from his chair, cutting off the path to the back door. They were surrounding me. I'd really rather go home, I said, keeping my voice steady. Thank you for dinner, but, Dad. Christine's grip tightened. Sit down. Not a request. A command. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Past the makeup and the practiced smile and the years of manipulation. Her eyes were cold. Calculating. The eyes of someone who'd made a decision and was prepared to see it through. Christine, I said quietly, let go of my arm. You're not leaving. Yes, I am. You don't understand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's too late for that now. I reached into my pocket and pressed the panic button twice. The next 90 seconds lasted a lifetime. Christine's grip on my arm tightened as she felt me move. Derek lunged forward, his hands reaching for my shoulders. Marcus shouted something to Evelyn in the kitchen, words I couldn't make out over the sudden roaring in my ears. I twisted away from Christine, breaking her grip with a move I hadn't used since a bar fight in my 20s. Derek's hands caught my jacket, pulling me off balance, but I used the momentum to spin toward the front door. Grab him. Marcus's voice. He's calling someone. The door was 15 feet away, then 10, then 5. Derek tackled me from behind, his weight driving me to the floor. My head hit the hardwood with a crack that sent stars exploding across my vision. The panic button flew from my hand, skittering across the floor toward the kitchen. Get his phone. Christine was standing over me, her designer heels inches from my face. Derek, get his phone. Hands pawing at my pockets. The phone ripped away. Derek's knee pressing into my back, pinning me to the ground. What did you do, old man? Marcus's face appeared above me, twisted with rage. Who did you call? FBI, I managed. They're coming, right now. The color drained from his face. He's lying. Derek's voice was desperate. He has to be lying. There's no way. The front door exploded inward. Not literally. No battering ram, no dramatic destruction. but the force with which Agent Reyes and her team entered made it feel like an explosion.
6 agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in a practiced choreography of controlled chaos. FBI. Everyone on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Derek's weight disappeared from my back as he was pulled away.
I heard Christine scream, not in fear, but in fury, as agents forced her to her knees. Marcus was shouting about lawyers and rights and harassment, his voice getting smaller as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Someone helped me to my feet.
Agent Reyes, her face tight with controlled anger. Are you hurt? I'll live. My head was throbbing where it had hit the floor. They were going to. I know. We heard everything through your phone. The moment she said, it's too late, we mobilized. She guided me toward the door. We've got units picking up Carlos Vega outside. It's over, Mr. Peterson.
It's finally over. I looked back at the living room, at the Thanksgiving decorations still hanging cheerfully, at the coffee cups abandoned on side tables, at my daughter being read her rights while her husband struggled against agents twice his size.
Emma and Jack appeared at the top of the stairs, their faces frozen in confusion and terror.
Grandpa? Emma's voice was small. What's happening? I wanted to go to her, to hold her, to explain, to somehow make this right.
But Agent Reyes's hand on my shoulder kept me moving toward the door. There'll be time for that later, she said quietly. Right now, we need to get you to safety. The last thing I saw before the door closed was my granddaughter's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her parents being arrested. Some images you never forget, this would be one of them.
The FBI field office was cold and bright, fluorescent lights humming overhead as I sat in a conference room with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink and a headache that wouldn't quit. Agent Reyes sat across from me, a tablet displaying real-time updates from the operation.
We've got all of them, she said. Christine, Derek, Marcus, Evelyn. Carlos Vega was taken into custody 2 blocks from the house. He had a syringe in his pocket. Labs analyzing the contents now, but preliminary tests suggest it's a digitalis compound. Causes cardiac arrest, nearly undetectable in standard autopsies. Digitalis. A heart medication that, in the wrong dose, stopped hearts instead of healing them. That was the plan. Inject me with something. The pie was the primary vector. We found residue of the same compound in the whipped cream on your slice. If you'd eaten it, you'd have started experiencing symptoms within an hour. Dizziness, nausea, irregular heartbeat.
They'd have offered to let you lie down in the guest room.
And somewhere in the night, your heart would have simply stopped. I thought about Derek eating the pie, about the extra slice he'd accepted so casually. Derek ate my piece. Different whipped cream. Yours was prepared separately, stored in a smaller container in the back of the refrigerator. We found it during the search. Agent Reyes shook her head. These people planned everything, except for one thing. What's that? They underestimated you, Mr. Peterson. They thought you were a confused old man who'd eat whatever was put in front of him and drink whatever was poured in his glass.
They didn't expect you to fight back. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion settling into my bones like concrete. I didn't fight back.
I just stopped being blind. Sometimes that's the same thing. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening settling around us.
Outside the conference room,
I could hear agents moving through the building, processing evidence, coordinating with prosecutors, building the case that would eventually send my daughter to prison. What happens now? I asked.
Arraignment tomorrow morning.
Christine and Derek will be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery. The full list is still being compiled. Marcus and Evelyn are facing accessory charges. Vega's looking at attempted murder and a host of pharmaceutical violations. And the children. Agent Reyes's expression softened. Child Services has been notified. They'll need emergency placement while their parents await trial.
Do you have any other family? Relatives who might be able to take them? I thought about Rosa, my sister, who'd welcomed me to Easter dinner when Christine had shut me out. About her grown children, responsible adults with families of their own.
I might know someone. But Agent Reyes, those kids just watched their parents get arrested. They're going to be terrified, traumatized.
They need someone they know. Someone they trust. Someone like their grandfather.
The question hung in the air between us. I don't know if I can do that, I admitted. After everything that's happened, how do I explain to them why their mother is in prison? How do I look at them without seeing her face? Those are good questions. Agent Reyes closed her tablet, giving me her full attention. But here's another question. If not you, then who? Those children didn't choose their parents. They didn't participate in the fraud or the conspiracy. They're victims too, Mr. Peterson. Maybe the biggest victims of all. I thought about Emma's laugh, the pure joy of a child who didn't know yet how cruel the world could be. About Jack's serious face, the way he trusted me to have all the answers. They'd asked about me, Christine had said in one of her manipulative texts. They'd wanted to know where their grandfather was. Maybe that was another lie. Another manipulation designed to keep me compliant. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the one true thing she'd said in years. I need to think about it, I said finally. I need time. You'll have time. The custody process takes weeks, sometimes months. But Mr. Peterson, those children are going to need someone in their corner. Someone who loves them without conditions or calculations. If that person could be you. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I left the FBI field office at 3:47 a.m., stepping into a Minneapolis night that felt cleaner than any air I breathed in months. The stars were hidden by city lights, but somewhere above the clouds, they were still there, still burning. My truck was where I'd left it, parked on the street outside Christine's house. The house itself was dark now, sealed with police tape, evidence technicians long since finished with their work. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the windows where my grandchildren had slept, the rooms where they'd played, the life they'd known that was now shattered beyond repair. They hadn't chosen this. They were innocent. And somewhere in the wreckage of my family, that innocence was worth protecting. I pulled out the secure phone Agent Reyes had given me and dialed Richard Chen's number. Harold? It's 4 in the morning. Is everything's fine. Well, not fine, but resolved. I need you to do something for me. Name it. The trust funds for Emma and Jack. The new conditions I added. Remove them. All of them. Those kids are going to need that money, and they shouldn't have to prove anything to deserve it. A pause. Are you sure? After everything that's happened. I'm sure. They're not their parents. They shouldn't be punished for what Christine did. All right. I'll have the amendments ready by Monday. I ended the call and stood for a moment longer, watching the empty house, the police tape fluttering in the cold November wind. Then I got in my truck and drove home, toward a future I hadn't imagined and couldn't predict, but was finally, mine to build. The weeks following Thanksgiving passed in a blur of depositions, meetings, and sleepless nights. The media caught wind of the story on December 3rd, when a reporter from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune connected the dots between the FBI arrests and the prominent Whitmore family's sudden disappearance from the social scene. The headline read, "Local businessman target of family murder plot, daughter among those arrested." My phone rang constantly, former employees wanting to express support, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in decades, journalists fishing for quotes and exclusive interviews. I ignored them all, retreating into the quiet of my house while the legal machinery ground forward without me. Richard Chen became my lifeline, filtering information and protecting me from the worst of the attention. The prosecution is building an airtight case, he told me during our December 10th meeting. They've got the surveillance recordings, the financial documents, the testimony from Amanda Reyes and Vincent Morrow. Carlos Vega is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's given them everything. Meetings, payments, the specific compounds they discussed using. What about Christine? Is she cooperating? Richard's face tightened. No, she's maintaining her innocence. Claims she was manipulated by Derek and his family, that she had no knowledge of the murder conspiracy. That's not true. I know. The prosecution knows. But it's her only play. If she can convince a jury that she was a victim rather than a participant, she might avoid the worst charges. I thought about the emails I'd seen, the text messages calling me the old man, the memo titled Peterson Asset Acquisition Timeline, with her suggestions throughout. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect. Then the evidence will prove it. Your job is to tell the truth when they call you to testify. The rest is up to the jury. Testify. The word sat heavy in my chest. I would have to sit in a courtroom, face my daughter across the room, and tell 12 strangers how she tried to kill me for an insurance payout. Some conversations you never imagine having. Some betrayals you never prepare for. Christmas came and went without celebration. I spent December 25th alone in my house, watching snow fall outside my window and thinking about Christmases past.
Margaret alive,
Christine young. The three of us gathered around a tree that never seemed big enough for all our joy. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now.
a different Harold Peterson, living a different life, loving a daughter who no longer existed. The children were with Rosa's family in Rochester. Child Services had approved her daughter Maria as emergency foster placement while the courts sorted out longer-term arrangements.
I'd spoken to Emma and Jack twice on the phone. Brief, awkward conversations filled with questions I couldn't answer and silences I didn't know how to fill. "Grandpa, when is Mommy coming home?" Emma had asked during our last call.
"I don't know,
"Sweetheart. Is she in trouble?" "Yes, she's in trouble. Because of what happened at Thanksgiving." "With the police?" "Yes." A long pause. Then, "Are you okay, Grandpa?" "Jack says someone was trying to hurt you." The innocence in her voice nearly broke me. She didn't understand. Couldn't understand. Her 7-year-old brain couldn't process the idea that her mother had been planning her grandfather's death. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm safe, and I want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you, both of you."
"That will never change. I love you too, Grandpa." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for an hour, staring at Margaret's photo, wondering how I would ever explain this to those children. How I would help them understand that their mother's choices weren't their fault, that they could still be good people despite coming from a family that had done terrible things. Margaret would have known what to say. She always did. But Margaret was gone, and I was left to figure it out alone. The trial began on February 14th, Valentine's Day, a coincidence that felt like cosmic mockery. The Hennepin County Courthouse occupied a block of downtown Minneapolis, its limestone facade projecting the gravity that justice demanded. I arrived at 8:30 a.m., 2 hours before my scheduled testimony, dressed in the Navy suit that had become my uniform for occasions I never wanted to attend. The courtroom was packed. Media in the gallery, families of the accused on one side, supporters of the prosecution on the other. I'd been warned to expect attention, but the reality was overwhelming. Dozens of eyes following my progress as I walked down the center aisle toward the witness waiting area. Christine sat at the defense table, flanked by 2 attorneys whose combined hourly rates probably exceeded my first year's salary at Peterson Construction. She'd lost weight since Thanksgiving, her face gone beneath makeup that couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes. Our eyes met as I passed. I expected to see hatred, defiance, the cold calculation that had marked every interaction since I'd learned the truth. Instead, I saw fear. Pure, naked terror, the kind that came from realizing consequences were finally, inevitably arriving. Good, I thought, she should be afraid. Then I kept walking. The prosecution calls Harold Peterson. The walk to the witness stand took approximately 15 seconds. It felt like 15 years. I settled into the chair, adjusted the microphone, and raised my right hand for the oath. The words were simple. Truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth. But they carried weight I'd never felt before. I do. The prosecutor was a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Richard, with steel gray hair and the manner of someone who'd spent 30 years pursuing justice and never tired of the hunt. "Mr. Peterson, can you describe your relationship with your daughter Christine prior to September of last year?" "Close. At least, I thought it was close. I saw her and my grandchildren regularly. I provided financial support for their family. I believed we had a normal, loving relationship." "And when did that perception change?" I told the story. All of it. The Christmas dinner rejection. The financial documents. Amanda Reyes and her folder of evidence. Vincent Morrow's forensic investigation. The listening devices. The FBI operation. Thanksgiving dinner and the pie I didn't eat. Throughout my testimony, I kept my eyes on Sarah Chen. I couldn't look at Christine. Couldn't watch her face as I described the daughter I'd loved being dismantled into the criminal she'd become. "Mr. Peterson, you've testified about emails in which your daughter referred to you as the old man and discussed you as a source of funds to be extracted. How did discovering those communications make you feel?" The question was simple. The answer was not. "Destroyed," I said finally. I felt like I'd been mourning a person who never existed. The daughter I thought I knew, the one I raised, the one I sacrificed for. She was a character in a story my daughter told to get what she wanted. The real Christine, the one who wrote those emails, I don't know her. I'm not sure I ever did.
Objection. Christine's defense attorney rose. The witness is speculating about the defendant's inner thoughts and motivations. I'll rephrase, Sarah Chen said smoothly. Mr. Peterson, based on your personal observations and the evidence you've reviewed, did your daughter's behavior suggest that she viewed you primarily as a source of financial resources? Yes. And did her behavior suggest that she was willing to cause you harm to access those resources more quickly? I finally looked at Christine. She was staring at the table, her fingers white around a pen she'd been using to take notes. Yes, I said. She was willing to kill me. Her own father. For money she'd already been stealing for years. Christine's head snapped up. Our eyes met again, and this time I saw something different. Not fear, not calculation. Fury. Pure, burning rage at being exposed, at having her careful performance stripped away, at facing consequences she'd never truly believed would come. Nothing further, Sarah Chen said. The cross-examination lasted 2 hours. Christine's attorney, a silver-tongued man named David Morrison, tried every angle, suggesting I was confused, implying I'd misinterpreted innocent communications, questioning my memory, my motivations, my mental state. Mr. Peterson, isn't it true that you've been experiencing significant stress since your wife's death? Yes. And isn't it possible that this stress affected your interpretation of normal family dynamics? Normal families don't take out forged life insurance policies on their parents and hire pharmaceutical suppliers to provide untraceable poison. Move to strike. Non-responsive. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may answer. Normal families don't install listening devices in their father's bedroom to monitor his private conversations. Normal families don't create fake subcontractors to steal from their father's business. Normal families don't discuss accelerating the timeline for their father's death. I leaned forward, speaking directly to the jury. What happened to me wasn't a misinterpretation. It was a conspiracy, and my daughter was at the center of it. Morrison tried to recover, but the damage was done. The jury had seen the documents, heard the recordings, watched the video of Carlos Vega describing exactly what he'd been hired to do. No amount of legal maneuvering could erase the truth. The verdict came on March 3rd, after 6 days of deliberation. I wasn't in the courtroom when it was read. Richard had advised against it, warning that the emotional toll might be too much. Instead, I waited at home, sitting in my kitchen with Margaret's photo and a cup of coffee that went cold hours before the phone finally rang. It's over, Richard said. Guilty on all counts. Christine, Derek, Marcus, Evelyn, all of them. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery, attempted murder in the case of the Thanksgiving incident. Sentencing is scheduled for next month, but the prosecutor is recommending 25 years for Christine and Derek, 15 for Marcus and Evelyn. 25 years. My daughter would be 66 when she got out, older than I was now, her entire middle age spent behind bars. I should have felt satisfaction, relief. Justice finally served. Instead, I felt hollow. What about Vega? 12 years, in exchange for his testimony. He'll be in federal custody, separated from the others. And the money, the assets they hid? The forensic accountants are still working, but early estimates suggest we can recover approximately $600,000 through civil forfeiture. The yacht's already been seized. The properties in Miami and Phoenix are in the process of being sold. It won't be everything, but it's substantial. $600,000. Roughly half of what they'd taken from me over the years. What about the life insurance policy? Voided for fraud. The insurance company was very cooperative once they understood the situation. No payout, no premiums refunded. It's like it never existed. I thanked Richard and ended the call, then sat in the silence of my empty house, trying to process what I was feeling. My daughter was going to prison for trying to kill me. My son-in-law would spend his best years in a cell. My grandchildren would grow up visiting their parents through plexiglass barriers, learning to navigate a world where mommy and daddy had done something terrible. Justice had been served. The bad guys had lost. The system had worked. So why did it feel so much like losing? The sentencing hearing was held on April 15th, tax day, another ironic calendar coincidence. I attended this time, sitting in the gallery with Rosa on one side and Richard on the other. The courtroom was less crowded than during the trial, the media having moved on to fresher scandals.
the curious public satisfied that justice would be done. Christine was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her designer clothes, and perfect makeup replaced by institutional uniformity. She'd aged another decade in the 6 weeks since the verdict, her face hollow, her eyes empty. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood slowly, her chains rattling against the defendant's table. "Your Honor, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was wrong, but I want my father to know." She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I want him to know that somewhere underneath all of it, I did love him. I do love him. The person I became, the things I did, they weren't the real me. They were the result of pressure, of expectations, of a husband and in-laws who pushed me toward things I never would have chosen on my own." She paused, waiting for a response I didn't give. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything." The words hung in the air between us, 25 feet of courtroom and a lifetime of betrayal. I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the part that remembered her as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman finding her way in the world, desperately wanted to believe that the daughter I'd loved was still in there somewhere. But I'd heard this performance before. The tearful apology, the blame deflection, the carefully crafted appeal to emotion that had kept me compliant for years. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. "Mr. Peterson," the judge said, "as the victim in this case, you have the right to make a statement before sentencing. Would you like to address the court?" I stood slowly, my knees protesting the movement, my heart protesting everything. "Your Honor, I've spent the last 7 months trying to understand how my daughter became the person standing in front of you today. I've looked at my own actions, wondering what I did wrong, what signs I missed, what I could have done differently." I paused, gathering myself. "The truth is, I don't know. I loved her the best I could. I supported her through every phase of her life. I gave her money I couldn't afford, time I didn't have, trust she didn't deserve. And in return, she plotted my death like I was an obstacle to be removed rather than a father to be loved." Christine's head dropped. I couldn't see her face, but I heard her crying, or performing crying, which was the same thing now. "My daughter just told you she's sorry. She told you the real Christine loved me, that she was pushed into this by other people. Your Honor, I've been listening to that story for years. Every time she wanted money, every time she needed a favor, every time she was caught in a lie. The same tears, the same apologies, the same promises that this time would be different." I turned to face Christine directly. "You don't get to do that anymore. You don't get to cry your way out of consequences. You don't get to blame Derek or Marcus or anyone else for choices you made with full knowledge of what you were doing. This is your responsibility. Own it." The courtroom was silent. "Your Honor," I continued, turning back to the bench, "I'm not asking for leniency, and I'm not asking for maximum punishment. I'm asking for justice. Whatever sentence you impose, I hope it gives my daughter time to become the person she should have been all along. Not for my sake, that relationship is over, but for her children. They deserve a mother who can look them in the eye and tell them the truth about what she did and why it was wrong." I sat down, my legs trembling. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Christine. "The defendant will rise. Christine Marie Peterson Whitmore, having been found guilty on all counts, I hereby sentence you to 23 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole after 15 years. May God have mercy on your soul." The gavel fell. And finally, it was over. The months following the sentencing were strange, quiet, like the aftermath of a storm, when the wind has stopped howling but debris still covers everything you once knew. I sold my house in May. The decision came easier than I'd expected. Every room held memories I no longer wanted. Margaret's photo watching me from the mantel, the kitchen where I'd been surveilled, the bedroom where I'd grieved while my daughter listened for signs of weakness. The house had been our home for 31 years, but it wasn't home anymore. It was evidence of a life that no longer existed. Richard helped me find a buyer within 2 weeks. A young couple, newlyweds, expecting their first child in September. They walked through the rooms with the kind of hope I remembered feeling at their age, before life taught me that hope was a currency that could be stolen. "It's perfect," the wife said, her hand resting on her belly. "I can see our family growing here." I signed the papers that afternoon and didn't look back. My new place was smaller, a 2-bedroom condo in Stillwater,
overlooking the St. Croix River.
Clean lines, minimal furniture, nothing from the old house except Margaret's photo and the cast iron skillet she'd used for Saturday morning pancakes. Some things you can't leave behind. Some things you shouldn't.
The question of Emma and Jack haunted me through the spring. They'd remained with Maria, Rosa's daughter, while the court sorted through the wreckage of their parents' lives.
The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, but temporary had stretched into months as social workers and lawyers debated what was best for two children whose entire world had collapsed.
Rosa called me in early June, her voice carrying the weight of a conversation she didn't want to have. "Harold, we need to talk about the kids. I know. Maria loves them. She'd keep them forever if that's what they needed. But," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "but they ask about you constantly. Every day, Emma wants to know when Grandpa's coming to visit.
Jack made a dinosaur drawing for you last week and cried when he realized he couldn't give it to you. The image hit harder than I'd expected.
My grandson, crying over a drawing he couldn't deliver to a grandfather who disappeared from his life. I don't know if I can do it, Rosa. Every time I look at them, I see her. I know. But Harold, those children didn't choose their mother. They didn't participate in any of it. They're victims, just like you."
Maybe more than you, because they don't even understand what they've lost. I stared out my window at the river, watching boats drift past on currents they couldn't control. What if I fail them?
What if I can't give them what they need? Then you try again. That's what family does. We fail, and we try again, and eventually we figure it out together. Rosa's voice softened. Those kids need someone who loves them without conditions.
Someone who'll show up even when it's hard. You've been that person their whole lives, Harold.
Don't let Christine take that away from them too. I visited Maria's house on a Saturday in mid-June, driving the 2 hours to Rochester with a knot in my stomach and Margaret's voice in my head telling me to stop being a coward.
The house was modest, a 3-bedroom rambler in a quiet neighborhood, toys scattered across the front lawn, evidence of children who'd found some measure of normalcy despite everything they'd been through. Maria met me at the door, her smile warm but cautious.
"They don't know you're coming. I thought it might be better as a surprise. Or worse. Only one way to find out." She led me through the house to the backyard, where Emma and Jack were playing on a swing set that had clearly been installed recently. Emma was pumping her legs, trying to go higher. Jack sat motionless on the adjacent swing, pushing dirt around with his feet. "Emma, Jack." Maria's voice carried across the yard. "Someone's here to see you." Emma looked up first.
Her eyes went wide, and for a terrible moment I thought she would run away, reject me the way I'd been afraid of rejecting her.
Instead, she launched herself off the swing mid-arc, hit the ground running, and slammed into my legs with the force of a small missile. "Grandpa." The word broke something open inside me.
Something that had been clenched tight since Thanksgiving, since the arrest, since I'd watched her face crumple as her parents were led away in handcuffs. "Hey, princess." My voice cracked. "I missed you. I missed you too. I missed you so much. Why didn't you come visit?" Maria said you were busy, but I didn't believe her because you always come when you say you will. Except you didn't come. And I thought maybe you were mad at us because of Mommy. "I'm not mad at you." I knelt down to her level, taking her face in my hands. "I could never be mad at you. What happened with your Mommy, that wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Where's your brother?" Emma pointed toward the swing set where Jack still sat motionless, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. He'd grown since Thanksgiving, taller, thinner, his face losing the last traces of baby softness. I walked toward him slowly, giving him space to react. "Hey buddy. Hey." His voice was flat. "Careful. Maria says you made a dinosaur drawing for me. It was stupid. I'd still like to see it." "If that's okay." Jack looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face for something. Anger, blame, rejection. The things he'd probably been expecting from every adult in his life since his world fell apart. "Why didn't you come before?" he asked, finally. The question deserved an honest answer. "Because I was scared," I admitted. "Because every time I thought about seeing you, I thought about your mom and what she did. And I was afraid that being around you would hurt too much. That wasn't fair to you." "I'm sorry. Mom says you're the reason she's in prison." The words landed like a punch. Of course Christine was still manipulating, still twisting the narrative,
even from behind bars. Of course she'd made me the villain in the story she told her children. Your mom made choices, I said carefully. Bad choices that hurt people. The reason she's in prison is because of those choices, not because of me. She says you lied about her. I didn't lie. I told the truth about what she did. Someday, when you're older, I'll explain everything. But right now, I need you to know one thing. I love you. I've always loved you. And nothing your mom did changes that. Jack's facade cracked. Just a little. Just enough for me to see the terrified child underneath. Do you promise? I promise. He was off the swing and in my arms before I could blink, his thin body shaking with sobs he'd probably been holding in for months. I want to come home, he whispered. I want everything to go back to normal. I held him tight, my own tears falling into his hair. I know, buddy, I know. Normal was gone. Normal had been a lie all along. But maybe, we could build something new. Something real. Something that couldn't be taken away. The custody process took 3 more months. There were home visits, psychological evaluations, court appearances, and endless paperwork. Social workers wanted to ensure I was stable enough to care for 2 traumatized children. Lawyers debated whether a 65-year-old man was the right choice for primary custody. Christine filed objections from prison, arguing that her children shouldn't be raised by the man who destroyed their family. The judge disagreed. On September 8th, exactly 1 year and 1 day after the Saturday when Christine had first told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas, I officially became Emma and Jack's legal guardian. We moved them into my Stillwater condo 2 weeks later, their belongings fitting easily into the spare bedroom I'd kept empty without entirely knowing why. Emma chose the bed by the window. Jack claimed the one near the closet, arranging his dinosaur collection on the nightstand with methodical precision. Is this our home now? Emma asked that first night, sitting on her bed while I tucked the covers around her. Yes. Forever? I thought about Christine in prison, about Derek in a different facility, about a future I couldn't predict, and promises I might not be able to keep. For as long as you need me, I said. Which I hope is forever. She smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her since Thanksgiving. I hope so too. The letter arrived in October. I recognized the return address immediately. Federal Correctional Institution, Waseca, Minnesota. Christine's prison, where she'd been transferred after sentencing to serve her 23 years. I almost threw it away, unopened. Almost. But something stopped me. Some need for closure, or maybe just morbid curiosity about what she could possibly say after everything that had happened. I waited until the kids were at school, then sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and Margaret's photo, watching me from across the room. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten in Christine's precise script. Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your attention, or your time, or anything else from you, ever again. But I need to say some things, even if you never read them. I've been in therapy here. Court mandated, obviously, but also because I needed to understand how I became the person who could do what I did to you. The person who planned her own father's death for money. The therapist says I have narcissistic personality disorder. She says I've probably had it my whole life. That it made me see other people as tools to be used rather than humans to be loved. She says it explains why I could lie to you so easily, why I didn't feel guilt about the things we planned, why even now part of me still believes I was justified. That part scares me. The part that still thinks you owed me that money, that you should have given it freely instead of making me take it. The part that sees your testimony at my trial as betrayal rather than truth. I'm working on killing that part. It's harder than you'd think. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm not writing to make excuses or shift blame. I'm writing because I want you to know that I understand now, really understand, what I did to you. Not just the fraud or the conspiracy or the attempted murder. All of it. Every lie I told. Every manipulation I used. Every time I made you feel like less than you were, so I could take more than I deserved. You were a good father, the best father I could have asked for, and I turned you into a victim because I was too broken to know what love actually meant. I'm sorry. I know that word is worthless coming from me. I know I said it at the sentencing and you didn't believe me, but I'm going to keep saying it anyway, in letters you'll probably throw away. Because someday, maybe after years of therapy and growth, and actually becoming a better person, maybe someday I'll earn the right to mean it. Take care of Emma
and Jack. They're the only good thing I ever did, and I don't deserve them either. But you do. You always did.
Christine. I read the letter twice, then a third time.
Then I folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer with Margaret's old letters, and went outside to watch the river flow past. Emma found me there an hour later, home from school with a backpack full of homework and questions about dinner. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "I'm okay, sweetheart. You look sad."
I pulled her close, wrapping my arm around her shoulders as we watched the boats drift by. "Sometimes I am sad," I admitted. "Sad about things that happened.
Sad about things that can't be changed.
But being sad doesn't mean I'm not also happy. How can you be both? I'm happy because you're here. Because your brother is here. Because even though bad things happened, we still have each other."
That's worth being happy about, don't you think? She considered this with the seriousness that only an 8-year-old could bring to philosophical questions.
"I think so," she decided. "But I also think you should have some ice cream. Maria says ice cream helps when you're sad." I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in longer than I could remember. Maria is a very wise woman. "What flavor?" "Chocolate."
Obviously. Obviously. We walked back to the condo together, her hand in mine, the October sun warm on our shoulders. Behind us, the river kept flowing, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out along its banks. Christine's letter sat in my drawer, its apology sincere or performed. I might never know which. But as I watched Emma skip ahead toward the promise of ice cream, I realized something. It didn't matter. What mattered was this moment. This child. This chance to build something real from the wreckage of something false. Margaret had always said that family wasn't about blood, it was about choice. About showing up. About loving people even when it was hard. I was finally starting to understand what she meant. 1 year later, the morning of September 14th arrived crisp and golden, the kind of Minnesota autumn day that made you believe in fresh starts and second chances. I woke at 6:15, the way I had for 40 years, but the silence that greeted me was different now. Not empty, expectant. I made coffee the way Margaret taught me, strong, with a splash of cream, no sugar, and carried it to the kitchen window overlooking the river. The St. Croix was mirror smooth in the early light, reflecting clouds that looked like promises written across the sky. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said to Margaret's photo, still in its place on the windowsill. Big day today. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Jack appeared first, his 9-year-old energy barely contained by Spider-Man pajamas that were already too short for his growing frame. "Grandpa, is it time yet? Can we start?" "Not yet, buddy. Emma's still sleeping. She's always sleeping. She's like a bear, a hibernating bear." I heard that. Emma's voice drifted from the bedroom, followed by the girl herself, wrapped in a bathrobe and rubbing sleep from her eyes. At 8.5, she'd developed a teenager's disdain for early mornings, though she'd never admit it. "Good morning, princess. Ready for pancakes?" Her face lit up. Saturday pancakes? The very same. It had become our ritual, every Saturday morning, just like the old days, except now the kitchen was smaller and the company was permanent. Margaret's cast iron skillet heated on the stove while I mixed batter from memory. The same recipe I'd been making for 40 years. Some things you don't change. Some things you hold on to. "Can I crack the eggs?" Jack asked, already reaching for the carton. "Carefully. I'm always careful. You got shell in the batter last week." "That was a learning experience." "You said learning experiences are good." I laughed, the sound still surprising me sometimes. A year ago, I'd wondered if I'd ever laugh again. Now it came easier, more often, triggered by small moments that added up to something larger than I'd expected. Fair point. Crack away. After breakfast, we drove to the farmer's market in downtown Stillwater. The kids ran ahead, weaving through stalls selling apples and pumpkins, and the last tomatoes of summer. I followed at a slower pace, nodding to vendors who'd come to recognize me over the past year. The old man with the 2 grandchildren, always buying too much produce and not enough sense to stay home on crowded Saturdays. "Mr. Peterson." A voice called from the honey stand. Amanda Reyes, the Amanda who'd started everything with a folder of evidence and a conscience that wouldn't stay quiet, waved me over. She'd moved to Stillwater 6 months ago, started a new career as a real estate agent in a town where no one knew her history. "Amanda, how's business?"
Slow but steady. Just closed on a farmhouse outside of town. Young family, 3 kids, reminded me of someone. She smiled, watching Emma and Jack argue over which apples to buy. They're looking good, happy. They're getting there, we all are. And you? How are you doing? The question deserved more than a polite deflection. Amanda had risked everything to give me the truth. She'd earned honesty in return. Some days are harder than others, I admitted. Christine writes every month. I read the letters. I don't respond. The therapist says that's okay, that I get to set my own boundaries, move at my own pace. But part of me wonders if I should. Respond, I mean. The kids ask about her sometimes, Jack especially. He's angry in ways he doesn't know how to express. The school counselor says it's normal, that children of incarcerated parents go through stages of grief just like anyone else. And Emma? I watched my granddaughter hold up 2 apples, comparing them with scholarly seriousness before selecting the winner. Emma's more like her grandmother. She processes things internally, doesn't talk much about what she's feeling, but she's been writing stories lately. Fairy tales about princesses locked in towers, waiting for someone to rescue them. You think she's writing about Christine. I think she's trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. We all are. Amanda nodded slowly. For what it's worth, Mr. Peterson, I think you're doing the right thing. Those kids need stability. They need someone who shows up. Whatever relationship they eventually have with their mother, that's for them to decide when they're ready. That's what the therapist says too. Smart therapist. We got home around noon, arms full of produce, and the comfortable exhaustion that came from a morning well spent. Jack immediately disappeared into his room to work on a Lego project he'd been building for weeks. A dinosaur museum, complete with tiny visitors and a gift shop. Emma settled on the couch with a book, her legs tucked under her in a position that couldn't possibly be comfortable but apparently was. I put away the groceries and stood for a moment in my quiet kitchen, taking inventory of a life I hadn't planned, but had somehow ended up living anyway. 66 years old. Widow. Raising 2 grandchildren whose parents were serving lengthy prison sentences. Living in a condo I'd owned for barely a year, in a town where I was still learning which streets led where. Not the retirement I'd imagined. Better, in some ways. Harder in others. The doorbell rang. I'll get it. Jack's voice echoed from his room, followed by the thunder of feet and the click of the lock. Grandpa, there's a lady here. I walked to the door to find Agent Reyes, Dana, not Amanda, standing on my welcome mat with a folder in her hands and an expression I couldn't read. Mr. Peterson, do you have a few minutes? Of course. Kids, give us the living room for a bit, okay? Emma and Jack retreated without protest, sensing the gravity that adults brought to certain conversations. I led Agent Reyes to the couch and waited. I wanted to deliver this in person, she said, handing me the folder. It's the final report on the Peterson case. Everything we recovered, everyone we prosecuted, all the loose ends tied up. I opened the folder and scanned the summary page. Names I recognized, numbers I'd memorized, a narrative of betrayal and conspiracy reduced to bureaucratic language and legal conclusions. Carlos Vega died in prison last month, Agent Reyes continued. Heart attack. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. And the others. Marcus Whitmore is appealing his conviction. It won't go anywhere, but it keeps his lawyers busy. Evelyn has apparently found religion. She's running a Bible study group in her facility. Derek, she paused. Derek requested a meeting with you. Through his attorney. I told them I'd pass along the message, but that you were under no obligation to respond. A meeting, what does he want? His lawyer says he wants to apologize. To explain. The usual things people want when they're facing 15 years and finally realize the consequences are real. I thought about Derek. The man who'd married my daughter, who'd called my values working class, who'd discussed accelerating my death over email like it was a business strategy. No, I said. I don't need to hear his explanations. I don't need his apology. I thought you'd say that. I'll let his lawyer know. Agent Reyes stood to leave, then hesitated at the door. Mr. Peterson, I've worked a lot of cases in my career. Elder fraud, family betrayal, conspiracy. I've seen it all. But I've never seen a victim handle it the way you did. Most people in your situation fall apart. They let the betrayal define them. You didn't. I had help. Good lawyers. A sister who wouldn't let me give up. 2 grandchildren who needed me to be better than I felt.
That's part of it, but the other part is you. The choice to keep going. The choice to rebuild instead of just surviving. She smiled. Those kids are lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. After she left, I sat with the folder for a long time, reading through the details of my own near murder like it was a story that happened to someone else. In a way, it had. The Harold Peterson who'd been blindsided by his daughter's betrayal, who'd discovered listening devices in his bedroom, who'd survived a Thanksgiving dinner designed to be his last. That man was gone, replaced by someone older, warier, but also somehow more alive. Trauma did that, I'd learned. It broke you apart and forced you to reassemble. The person who emerged wasn't the same as the person who went in. Couldn't be. But different wasn't always worse. Sometimes, different was better. That evening, after dinner and homework and the bedtime negotiations that had become our nightly routine, I sat on my small balcony, watching the sun set over the river. Jack had requested a story before sleep, not from a book, but from my head. He wanted to know about the dinosaurs again, the ones that had ruled the earth for millions of years before disappearing in a single catastrophic event. But some of them survived, right? He'd asked, his eyes heavy with approaching sleep. The birds, they're dinosaurs too. That's right, the birds survived. So the dinosaurs didn't really go extinct, they just changed. I suppose that's one way to look at it. He'd fallen asleep before I could elaborate, leaving me with the image of ancient creatures transforming into something new, something that could thrive in a world their ancestors wouldn't recognize. Change, adaptation, survival through transformation. Maybe that was the lesson. Not that bad things don't happen, but that they don't have to be the end. That even after catastrophe, betrayal, loss, the death of everything you thought you knew, life could continue. Different, but continuing. I pulled out my phone and composed a text to Rosa. Thank you. For everything. For not giving up on me when I wanted to give up on myself. Her response came within minutes. That's what family does. Speaking of which, Thanksgiving at my place this year. Maria's making tamales. The kids would love it. Thanksgiving. A year ago, the word had meant poison in my pie and surveillance teams outside the door. Now it meant tamales and laughter, and a house full of people who actually wanted me there. We'll be there, I typed back. I'll bring dessert. Not pie? Definitely not pie. Maybe cookies. Something safe. LOL. Love you, brother. Love you too. I stayed on the balcony until the stars came out, thinking about Margaret and Christine and the strange paths that had led me here. Margaret would have known what to do. She would have found a way to forgive Christine, to maintain a relationship even through the prison walls and the weight of what had happened. She was better than me that way, more generous, more capable of seeing the good in people even when they didn't deserve it. But Margaret was gone, and I was the one who had to figure out what forgiveness meant, what relationship was possible, what legacy I wanted to leave for the grandchildren sleeping in the next room. Christine's letters sat in my drawer, a growing stack of apologies and explanations, and pleas for connection. I'd read them all. I'd responded to none. Maybe someday I would. Maybe the wound would heal enough to allow a conversation, a visit, some form of relationship that acknowledged both what she'd done and the fact that she was still my daughter. Or maybe not. Maybe the damage was too deep, the betrayal too complete. Maybe the best I could offer was silence. Not cruelty, but protection. For myself. For Emma and Jack. For whatever peace I'd managed to build from the wreckage of my old life. I didn't know yet. I didn't have to know. What I knew was this. Tomorrow morning, I would wake at 6:15 the way I had for 40 years. I would make coffee the way Margaret taught me. I would say good morning to her photo and start breakfast for 2 children who depended on me to be present, consistent, real. I would show up. The way I'd always shown up. Even when the people I was showing up for didn't deserve it. That was the only legacy that mattered. Not money or property or business success. Just presence. Just love. Just the daily choice to keep going even when the world gave you every reason to stop. The river flowed past in the darkness, carrying whatever it carried toward destinations I couldn't see. Above me, the stars burned with ancient light, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath them. I finished my coffee, went inside, and checked on the children one last time. Emma slept with her arm around a stuffed elephant Margaret had given her years ago,
one of the few possessions that had survived the chaos of the past year. Jack had kicked off his covers, his Lego dinosaur museum visible on the desk beside him, half finished but full of promise. "Good night, kids," I whispered. "Love you." Neither of them stirred. But somewhere in their dreams, I hoped they knew. I closed the door softly and walked to my own room, where Margaret's photo sat on the nightstand the way it had for years, through every chapter of my life since she'd left. "We did okay," I told her. "Not the way we planned. Not the life we imagined. But okay." She smiled her eternal smile, offering no judgment. No answers. Just presence. Just love. I turned off the light and let the darkness settle around me, comfortable and familiar. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new opportunities to fail and try again, and maybe, eventually, get it right. But tonight, I was at peace, and that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Have you found your own version of peace after something that felt impossible to survive? Let me know. For the next story, click the video on the left. And remember, family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. Thank you for listening.